How do you do? The Box Office Pulp Board feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We're about to unfold a cinematic commentary track, made by a group of men who sought to create a podcast after their own ravings, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with three great mysteries of the internet: analysis, observation, and deconstruction. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel you'd not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to... well, we've warned you. Now, to pause and refresh. For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand in the lobby, with buttered popcorn, golden good and hot from the popper, your favorite candies, wholesome and rich, plus delicious Dr. Pepper, so bright and bracing with a tang and tingle unmatched by any other beverage. Enjoy an ice-cold Dr. Pepper at our beverage stand right now, and then return to fully appreciate this bop and a movie commentary track. Enjoy.
Eric, what have you done? I'm sorry, Charles. I couldn't help it. What have you told Stryker? Everything. The war has begun.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Box Office Pulp, your one-stop podcast for movies, madness, moxie, and tonight, many more mutations. The Bach Crew is continuing our commentary series for the X-Men movies with, well, I mean, should be a surprise. Last time was X-Men. This time it's X2, X-Men United. I'm your host, Cody. Joining me today for this Bop in a Movie are my co-host, Mike. Say hello, Mike.
Fun X-Men fact. Ronnie in the movie universe would later go on to become Bastion, the future Sentinel, who would come back in time to destroy the X-Men.
That was certainly a fact. I don't know if fun or not, but we'll let the audience decide. And say hello to my other co-host, Jamie. Say hello, Jamie.
I can only manipulate the fire. I can't create it.
That would be a major bummer, though.
Do you have to be?
No, I think he's right. This is a bummer. Like, if your power is, well, you can't conjure fire. If there's some around, you can play with it.
Oh my god, fire's only the easiest thing to fucking make.
You have a lighter, Pyro. For God's sake, your costume is a fire factory.
You can make fire with two goddamn fucking sticks. Tom Hanks
He doesn't
did it.
have time for that. The cops are coming up on him. He's got to be out there playing Boy Scout. It doesn't work.
I don't know. I would love Pyro to fucking take out two sticks that are like dramatically have like sharks' teeth like carved into them, kneel down, and just start fucking rubbing them back and forth.
Hold on, I need about 5 minutes for this to work. He's out there with like a bunch of crumpled up newspaper and a magnifying glass.
Where the X-Men and the Brotherhood are running at each other like it's the opening of X-Men the Animated Series, and he's just rubbing two sticks together, just kind of like lightly. Finally, there's a spark, and he can do something. It goes out though with a rough wind.
He's just getting bullied by Iceman relentlessly.
I can make the ice.
I would love it if Iceman could only manipulate the ice, but he couldn't create it.
He could
I
still
could
be
only
king of
make it
Minnesota.
melt.
I can just throw ice cubes at you. That's it.
Anyway, we're
X-Men
doing
are
commentary
dumb.
for X-Men 2, X-Men United.
X-Men 2, X-Men United. The title, that's just a fun thing to say.
The least used subtitle in movie history. I think Curse of the Black Pearl is said aloud more often.
It's very good with the subtitle gets lightly dunked on in the commentary track.
All right, folks. Before we actually start the commentary, let's go over our official drink of the evening. This one's going to take some prep, so put this episode on pause after I give the description of it, and come back in like 2 days, and then drink along with us. Anyways, tonight's drink is the Black Betty. What you're going to need for ingredients is 1.5 ounces of silver tequila, a half ounce of creme de cassis, 1 ounce lime juice, a 1/4 ounce of black sesame syrup, which I'll tell you how to make in just a second, an egg white, a half teaspoon of activated charcoal,
And the garnish, I'm going to tell you how to make too, but you need dehydrated beetroot sugar.
Cody, this sounds more like homework than recreation.
This sounds expensive.
Yes. This drinking should not be fun. It should be a task that you throw yourself into to overcome. Anyways, this takes a lot of prep, so let's before we worry about mixing the final drink and whether it tastes good, which I can't tell you, I haven't tried it yet. We got to take a step back and let's focus on making the black sesame syrup. So what you're gonna need is take about 2 cups of black sesames and toast them in a pan lightly. I'm gonna be honest, I couldn't find black sesame, so I just used normal sesame seeds, and we're gonna assume that's fine. Also, 2 cups of that seems expensive, so you're fine just getting the regular shit. Anyways, after you've toasted this stuff lightly, let it cool down, then throw it into a blender. Next, get a cup and a half of sugar and a cup and a quarter cup of water. Throw that together, bring it to a simmer. Once the sugar's dissolved, then throw the blended sesame seeds back into the mix. Bring that to a boil over medium heat. Let that cool for 3 hours. Once totally cooled, go ahead and get out some cheesecloth or a really fine mesh and strain out all the sesame seed bits. And while you're at it, add 1 teaspoon of orange blossom water and an ounce of vodka. They actually sell like little tiny mini bottles of vodka with orange blossom water, so you don't have to get those separate. You don't have to go find some orange blossom water. You can just buy one of those mini vodka bottles, and there you go. That's your syrup. Now let's focus on our garnish. So you're gonna need to buy 4 large beets, and then you're gonna have to juice those. So I've never juiced beets before. Basically, all I did was chop them up with a kitchen knife, throw them into a blender. And then just tried to strain all the pulp out through a mesh strainer. The pulp is what you want, though. You actually don't need the juice, which is a shame because you produce a shit ton of juice by doing this. I threw mine out because I have no need in my life for beet juice, but maybe you do. It seems healthy. Anyways, take that pulp that you have created, wring out the excess juice, like in a towel, then spread the pulp onto a baking tray. Put the baking tray in an oven or a dehydrator at about 120 degrees, low heat, and leave it in there until the pulp is completely dry. This is going to take a couple of hours. Once all that's done, take your dry pulp, add it to a grinder or blender with a half cup of sugar, blitz that into a fine powder, and there you go. Nothing to it. So that's prep work. That's all done. We're ready now, right, to make the drink? So take your ingredients, combine all of them into a mixing tin, and dry shake. Then add ice, shake again for about 15 seconds. That should cool it down, and the dry shake should allow the egg to kind of foam up the way you want it to. Then strain all of that into a small rocks glass, no ice. Once you've got a good pour, you're going to garnish the top with beetroot sugar. That should float on top of the foam from the egg, and you get a really neat drink that's pretty much pitch black thanks to the activated charcoal, with kind of a grayish white foam on the top, and then the beetroot sugar sprinkled on top of that foam. It looks pretty cool as far as drinks go. I'm going to take a sip of this now and see if this was all worthwhile. This is fantastic.
Oh, thank God.
This is a wonderful drink. Oh my God, I'm so happy.
I was really hoping everyone was going to make that along with you, spending several days and what sounds like at least $80.
It wasn't
making that, and you take a sip and I've let you just stray, folks at home.
Well, let's back up here. I mean, cost-wise, you can get the tequila for $20. You can get the creme de casas for about $10 if you get a cheap brand, $15 with a little bit nicer one. And you can reuse those, I'm assuming. Lime juice, that's cheap. That's like $2, and you can use that for plenty of things. Beets, that's a handful of dollars. That's not bad. A bag of sugar is pretty cheap. Sesames are kind of expensive. That's like $5 for a cup or so. So that sucks. You could probably just make this with simple syrup if you want to be basic, I guess.
Cody, absolutely nothing about those instructions could ever be basic.
Well, that was kind of the point. If you remember, folks, from the previous commentary, the drink suggestion was ginger ale. So I wanted to go the opposite direction this time. If the first drink is just laying the groundwork for drinking and watching a movie, this is where we really let the action fly. This is the X2 X-Men United of drinks in my mind. We have stepped it up. We have made a much fancier concoction. Boom.
Does that mean for The Last Stand, you're just going to cut out most of the steps and leave the listeners confused?
For the last stand, I'm just going to take the bag of activated charcoal and dump it in my mouth and die.
Sounds tasty.
Speaking of the activated charcoal, though, that stuff fucking sucks. Like, it's a very fine black powder that gets everything dirty. Like, I opened my bag and just sent a giant cloud of it into my apartment. And now, like, every time I touch my fridge or grab a glass, everything is just covered in soot.
We've been recording for 10 minutes.
Yeah, but you have a baller drink. All right. So anyways, folks, now that you're ready to start drinking and watching the movie, Mike's going to count us down. When he gets to whatever he's using for his countdown, I'm assuming 1, 2, 3, the movie's going to play. We're going to talk over it. You can watch the movie with us, or you can treat this as a normal standalone podcast. It's your life. You do what you want. I'm not your dad. Sound good? I think the audience is ready. Mike, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Do us the honors, Mike, and count us down.
1, 2, 3.
God damn, I'm so happy this drink turned out.
We're very proud of you, and we're very proud of the drink, Cody.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
fuck,
good.
it's delicious.
We'll frame the drink. We'll put it in the shadow box.
Mmm. The only good drink we made so far.
For every fly that ends up in the drink, a year has passed.
All right, folks. Let's get our movie facts out of the way here. Directed by
X-Facts.
Brian Singer. X-Facts! Directed by Brian Singer. Oh, Jamie, what?
No, I was just adding to the X-Facts thing.
Just a guitar riff, you know.
Okay.
Marvel logo,
I
by the
like
way.
this.
Yay.
Yay, comic flipping. The screenplay, once again by David Hayter, Dan Harris, and Michael Dougherty. Hayter returned from the first film, but this time we get our 2 extra guys with them. Dougherty and Harris are a writing team, and yeah, they wrote Urban Legends, Bloody Mary, and Superman Returns, so good for them. Our cast here, boy, there's a lot of great names. Patrick Stewart as Professor X, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Halle Berry as Storm, Famke Jensen returns as Jean Grey, James Marsden as Cyclops, Anna Paquin as Rogue, Shawn Ashmore as Iceman, Rebecca Romaine as Mystique, and a couple of new faces. We've got Brian Cox as William Stryker, we have Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, Aaron Stanford as Pyro, and Kelly Hu as Deathstrike. Big old cast, big cast. If you're listening to the movie right now, you can hear that big old score. This time the music is by John Ottman. I had to double check this because I thought Ottman was an editor. He won the Oscar for Best Film Editing on Bohemian Rhapsody. But he's also a composer and a director. He gave us scores for H20, Lake Placid, Urban Legends Final Cut. He also directed that movie. Eight-Legged Freaks, Bubble Boy, House of Wax, the remake, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and pretty much all the Singer movies. Our cinematography here is by Newton Thomas Siegel. He's returning from X-Men. The editing is also by John Ottman. This was released May 2nd, 2003. The first one came out summer of 2000, so actually a decent amount of time between entries. Our runtime is 2 hours, 13 minutes. Budget was $110 million. Pretty good step up since the previous X-Men, I believe, was $75 million, about. Our worldwide box office was $407.7 million. Which is about $100 million more than the first movie made. So even though the budget jumped up about $30 million, hey, still making good money. Boom, X-Facts. And now we get to see the best scene in the whole movie.
Cody likes Nightcrawler.
I like Nightcrawler a lot. He
Don't
is
we all?
the best mutant. As a kid watching this movie, holy shit, it's just the first scene is everything I could have possibly wanted from an X-Men movie. Everything after this was just a bonus. I got to see a scene of Nightcrawler acrobating and bamfing his way through the White House and just taking out Secret Service agents like they were nothing.
And taking out copyright-free George Bush.
And what a fucking,
He had it coming.
gauntlet mission statement the movie throws down. Hey, remember the first movie? Here's Nightcrawler bamfing around and doing acrobatics and fighting people.
I love how this movie opens with an action scene that is more energetic and dynamic than the entire third act of the first movie. Let's talk about opening on a high note.
It's so cool. I mean, this is perfect. If you have an X-Men, you want to be able to do the crazy shit.
There's something deeply rewarding about seeing Nightcrawler's bamfing used in a modern action scene.
Yes.
Like, that was the amazing thing watching this for the first time. It's like, oh, that is how Nightcrawler would fight.
I've always dreamed it.
Spider-Man swing for the first time. It's like, oh yeah, that's how it would work.
Oh man, and think of like other action scenes that have this quality to them. I have very few. I'm not saying other movies have bad action, but this one is just such a unique idea. This guy can teleport everywhere. Also, he can flip around and kick you in the face 5 times, and he looks like he's some sort of blue demon.
Oh, it's fascinating to watch this and see the through line that leads all the way to the Quicksilver scene in Days of Future Past.
Man. Plus, we have Mozart in the background, so let's just make this even more epic. Just throw some.
And now slow motion.
Music. Slow motion kicks to the face, wire work, people getting thrown all over the place. God damn, so cool.
And just a little filming fact, this was done with a high-speed camera, and Singer's use of the high-speed camera here would later influence how he shot Quicksilver.
Makes perfect sense. Also, if you pay attention to Nightcrawler, sometimes he has a CGI tail. Most of the time he has a CGI tail. In other shots, though, he actually has a rubber tail.
Yeah.
So it's a neat little blend they have going.
And even that was a cool effect where it was a practical knife being handed to him, but they just painted out the hand and replaced it with the tail.
Yeah. Oh, and now Canada. It's no Nightcrawler. To go back to Nightcrawler, because that's all I want to talk about. I love the little bit of personality they gave his tail. Like when it flips the knife around to put it in the hand. Those little tiny quirks really help sell CGI.
Well, the tail is comic book fun time Nightcrawler.
It really is.
Just the tail.
Oh, yeah.
So, hey, actually, Wolverine. Just reveling in the fact that they finally got his hair right.
Give him a stogie. He's got the hair.
And in that shot, he's wearing that weird, cap wig because his Van Helsing hair is, stuffed up in there.
I loved it when they admitted that fact on the commentary.
I love for one sequence he just has Barry Windsor Smith hair.
For when he's staring at a wolf, so it's perfect.
Also, you mentioned we had a 3-year gap between the release of the first film and this. I think the kind of the elephant in the room, and that is between these two movies, we saw Spider-Man grace the screens, and I feel like you can see the freedom that the existence of Spider-Man granted future directors all over this movie. It's okay, Spider-Man exists. That made all the money in the world. Sony is very happy with their crazy superhero movie. Fox can unclench its asshole and let us make an X-Men movie.
I love the slow transition of Wolverine into this growling Arctic fox wolf thing.
Comic panel. Well, you can see that even with just more powers, more how freely they're using code names.
Mm-hmm.
Just the general comic bookiness isn't as hidden as it was previously.
Yeah. Well, with the additional budget here, everything feels a little more pumped up. We mentioned in the first commentary how great it was with the limited budget, how instead of just trying to go for lots of fistfights, there were some decent psychological kind of standoffs happening. And in this one, now they have more cash, so they can have a blend of that stuff. And now when they go into the big fisticuff scenes, it feels much better.
That lady is so pissed off that Famke Janssen is checking her out.
She's so tall.
How dare that giant woman walk through this museum? I mean, yeah, of all the powers out there, I think telepathy would be the one I would want the least. I don't need to know what my coworkers think about me.
I don't want Cyclops' powers.
Yeah.
I don't look that good in sunglasses.
But if anyone disagrees and says you look shitty, 1, you wouldn't be able to read their minds to find that out, and 2, you could just blast them with your optic beams.
No, I couldn't lose control, Cody.
That's the most important thing about being Cyclops. You lose that, they take the powers away.
Well, that's perfect. You don't even want the powers.
That's what happened to him when he was mind control later in the movie. He lost control and fought Jean.
That mostly worked out.
Jean died.
Yeah, well, I mean, for him, it worked out.
He later died in a movie later.
Well, yeah, but he got a whole movie of not being dead.
He was in mourning, so he was dead emotionally.
I don't know if those are necessarily tied. We're all deep on that thought now. Like, did
really
Cyclops
are.
actually love his wife? Who knows?
This fascinated me when I was rewatching this. I never noticed that they were eating paninis, and I love the idea of Pyro ordering a panini.
I never noticed that. Also, I had to look this up and make sure this dude wasn't Matt Bomer.
Oh, you thought that too?
Like, he looks like a fucking baby-faced 2000s Matt Bomer. I mean, we live in a world where the internet found out like 6 months ago that Rami Malek was the gay best friend on The War at Home, so anything's possible.
I think we got away from an important point here. What is the worst mutant power to have? Mike, dig through all of your X-Men comics and find me the worst mutant to be.
You could be Slug Tongue.
That one's pretty bad. Well, I guess Beak was pretty bad, because Beak was... Oof.
I'm gonna
Beak was
marinate on
painful.
that for a
His
second.
bones were... I mean, I guess Warren's bones are hollow, but Beak looked like he was in pain all the time from his bones being hollow.
I'd still rather be Beak than Skin. The mutant whose power is... Skin.
Skin just falling all over the place. Husk is pretty...
Ooh.
No, Husk gets stuff from her powers. I think Husk was
All right,
originally supposed to make
I
a
want to
cameo in
continue
this.
this line of thought, but right now I just want to point out this scene was mind-bending to me as a 13-year-old. And it's such a simple effect. They really just were like, everyone stop fucking moving. Just hold still.
Higher mimes.
Like, as a kid, I knew this had to be something special, right? Like, I didn't know if they somehow, like, okay, you walk through the scene, and then we'll take, like, a still image of the actors. I really overthought it. Then years later, I was like, oh, yeah, you can see some of the people wiggle a little bit. It's just a really, really impressive piece of coordination and physical performance.
Now, this entire museum sequence is such a great use of exposition. Right down to Storm once again revealing the tonal details in one of her classes.
And the
then we
lead
just cut
scenes
to
for
an
that
X-Men.
too are fucking fascinating with the kids watching an anti-mutants presentation that's in the museum.
One of the many times Jubilee will be cut out of a movie.
Poor Jubilee.
That actor, it's the same actress too, brought back for X3.
So I just love this X-Men the animated series conversation they're having. They just sit in Xavier's office and discuss the politics of the day. While Scott looks intense.
If you're making an X-Men movie, you feel like you gotta have those aspects, right? It's just an action movie without that.
And it was fascinating to hear that they were deeply concerned with that while filming, because they thought they were making a movie that was not going to be the shot of adrenaline that people wanted out of the first movie. They thought it was going to be too cerebral.
Well, it's got to be cerebral. I think that's the deal with X-Men. You need that attachment to them being outsiders persecuted by an unjust society.
And when
Other
you
than
lose
that,
that,
like,
you just end up with X-Men Origins.
Yeah, you end up with a big action movie where no one cares about the stakes or characters. That's the strongest point in these first two X-Men movies. There's enough kind of political intrigue going on where you get kind of rooted into these problems and you want these characters to be able to find their way through this without, having to overturn the entire United States and kill the president.
Speaking of, I'm fascinated by depictions of George Bush-like presidents from this specific era, from like 2002 to 2003, where people still kinda liked George Bush, so it wasn't parody yet, but they were still going for Bush-like.
Yeah.
On the commentary tracks, they mentioned that they weren't specifically going for George W., but Singer also says, I think if you're doing a movie and you need a president, you're unconsciously modeling your president off of the real life equivalent.
I was like when everybody was faux Clinton in the 90s.
Pretty much. Which makes a certain amount of sense. Although it seems like you're more likely to get a George W. knockoff in any movie that needs a president than anyone else.
Yeah, this is also, whether it's conscious or not, vaguely 9/11-esque.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the president's fear to tax them into,
Yeah, that's a shift from the plot of God Loves, Man Kills, which this movie took a lot of inspiration from. I remember whenever this movie was released, there was a certain amount of blowback from fans who felt that changing Stryker from a televangelist to just a military spook was stripping the story of its politics. And especially rewatching it now, I could not disagree with that more. I mean, by the time this movie came out, televangelists had become such an easy target. It would almost be making it too cartoony and too
could
comic
be parody.
books. Yeah, to just have him be an evil religious guy. Meanwhile, Stryker, as one of the many, many dudes after 9/11 who were whispering in people's ears and saying, oh, you have to get rid of these people. That is, I feel, infinitely more political for the time it was made. And to a certain extent is kind of a brave choice because, like I said earlier, we were still in that period between 9/11 and the start of the war in Iraq where America as a whole was kind of on board with jingoism again.
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah. It took a couple of years for people to really back out of it. I think there was some token resistance to it, but by and large, people were kind of like, oh, no, we should go to war. And I do like the drawback in Stryker's dialogue where he mentions, fuck, I was killing people in Vietnam when you were still sucking on your mama's teat. The idea that he has always been part of these gigantic quagmire-type wars and is just perfectly fine pushing another one onto the American public.
Yeah, I think that's a very key shift, too, like in context. Reading God Loves, Man Kills in 2020, this isn't a criticism of the book at all, because holy shit, God Loves, Man Kills may be the perfect X-Men story. Like, if you were going to show aliens what the X-Men were all about, it would be that story. It's flawless. But as a consequence of the time that it was written in, it can come across as very naive in the way it portrays Stryker and his relationship to the outside world. In Claremont's story, Stryker is an aberration. He's somebody from outside who's looking to corrupt the infrastructures that would normally protect people. Like, it's still shown that most of America doesn't like Stryker, the right, and other religious leaders don't really know what to make of Stryker. The president is willing to hear him out, but the general consensus in Washington seems to be that he's a far-right kook. And since that book came out, we've seen from Reagan and Bush, and with the situation going on now, institutions aren't really here to protect us from people like that. Institutions create people like that. And I think the choice to make Stryker 100% part of the establishment it rings far truer.
All right. So we haven't actually talked about Brian Cox himself, and what a huge get for the movie. The guy brings so much gravity and not really charisma, but like an anti-charisma kind of to this character, which is fantastic because if you're the main heavy in a superhero movie and you don't have superpowers, that's a hard sell. Most fans are probably just going to roll their eyes and go, oh, this guy's boring. You better have a really cool henchman that can do all the neat stuff he can't. but it's Brian Cox. He makes the character so interesting. You're along for the ride every time he has a dialogue bit. Unrelated to that, I really love the insert shot of Magneto's fingers sliding along the glass table and slowly losing traction. It's a wonderful little piece of visual storytelling. You know, in just 2 seconds, you get the idea of what this drug can do and the situation that Magneto finds himself in, where he is panicking, scraping his fingernails just to try and get out of it, and then loses all that tension in just a second.
Yeah, I kind of miss when these movies were constructed with such precision.
Nice little bit of insert work. Just some good second unit.
Also, just a great choice on Cox's part to go with that voice and that accent.
Oh, yeah.
It says so much, and it could very easily kind of be cartoony, you know, going with like the Southern thing, but ooh, it works.
And allows him to say Wolverine. It's his greatest Brian Cox's finest contribution to the arts, as far as I'm concerned.
And the overall X-Men mythos, let's be honest.
I like this little visual reminder of Wolverine's powers, just seeing the cigar, extinguish on his palm and his palm healing.
Once again, I love the way they always play very casually the use of the mutant powers. Like when, you know, Iceman later freezes Wolverine's beer and shit. It's the little things where you actually don't see the powers used in big bombastic ways that often, I would say, in the first two movies. It's very just true to life.
They get them in showcase moments.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoy the little bit where Wolverine and Iceman meet properly for the first time. They shake hands, and Iceman flexes a little bit and kind of freezes Wolverine's skin.
Finally, someone I can hurt.
What a dick.
That's how I always say hello, by causing frostbite.
It's fascinating to rewatch the first two X-Men movies and just make a note of every time they go out of their way to subtly remind you of a plot point or of how a character's powers work or a little bit of backstory, especially in this movie where it's all woven into the dialogue so well.
Well, this movie's already, 2 hour 15, something like that. So, yeah, they really can't afford to drag their feet on exposition. They got to try and move as quickly as they can, because they already are kind of going over what most people, I think, would assume is the best runtime for an action movie. I've always subscribed to Del Toro and like Edgar Wright's idea that action movies should be about 2 hours or less. Otherwise, they kind of drag.
It's something I think specifically comic book movies have lost the last couple of years. Like, as great as the MCU is, they do lack that, you know, let's put in little bits of, you know, little tiny bits of the plot instead of big exposition jumps or little reminders of how certain things work. There's a lot of assumption that people will go online to remind themselves about things.
Yeah.
Of how objects in the universe kind of work, and I miss stuff like this where it's so deftly handled. Like, you don't even realize you're being told information most of the time. Like, it's so expertly done of setting up each and every part of the world.
I mean, look at that Cerebro scene. In a single sequence, we got, we're introduced to these two characters again. Here's how Xavier's powers work. Here's how Wolverine's powers work. Here's where we are with these characters' relationships and Wolverine's story. Also, we just seeded the entire third act for you. You didn't realize.
Yeah.
That's it. The MacGuffin and the plot of the movie are all explained in that couple minutes scene. Okay, so this shot right here I love of Senator Kelly transforming into Mystique. Because it's directly ripped off of the Twilight Zone. Singer even admitted this. There's a Twilight Zone where the devil escapes and he transforms from a man into Satan as he walks between different pillars so they could apply the makeup in between cuts. Just a really neat little nod.
It's very random too, which is what I love. Also, listening to the commentary, I wasn't really online back when the first, back when X2 came out. I was not aware there was
in the Twitter hellscape.
I was not aware there was a fervor about people thinking the production forgot they killed Senator Kelly in the first film.
Oh, I remember that.
You idiots, God.
Well, the big thing I remember as soon as it was announced that Davison was coming back, people were like, "Oh, that's why Magneto said, 'Are you sure you saw what you saw?' Because he's gonna be a blob man. And he's gonna join the X-Men." You do you remember how the last movie ended, right?
God,
Oh.
the days before
Hey everyone, look,
fucking
cameos
hey, the days
in
before
text form only.
home video was normal. God, just I think the grit through the teeth sarcasm in the commentary really makes that. Just, and here's where Senator Kelly turns back into Mystique because he's just Mystique in disguise.
It's stunning people didn't get that. Yeah, it's just
Franklin
weird.
Richards.
I just want to say, people shit on the X-Men movies a lot for mishandling the seeding of things for sequels. Project Wide Awake being on that computer actually makes sense with Days of Future Past. It took like 40 years to develop the set movies. That is a accidental seeding.
Work with what you got. To go back to a point you made earlier, Mike, in like 5 minutes of this movie, we already have a perfect understanding of how Wolverine's powers work. Like, you just know what he's about and what his powers do. I'm still not really sure what Scarlet Witch can do in the MCU.
Nobody can.
To be fair, are you sure of what Scarlet Witch can do in the Marvel comic books?
No.
Other than make
true.
no more mutants.
That's fair, yeah. But I'm just saying, in the Marvel movies, it seems like powers are a little arbitrary. You never quite understand what a character is and is not capable of.
Oh, Vision's powers have never been established. Ever.
Not quite, yeah. Whereas in these films, you get a pretty good grasp on most of the characters very quickly. And maybe the most you have to do is a scene like Pyro explaining, "Oh, I can't create fire, I can only manipulate it."
Yeah, it's something like last commentary we were talking about like what a good job the first movie did about stripping down all of the bullshit that the X-Men continuity had been saddled with by the time that movie was made. Like, they also do it for the powers very well in these first two movies. Like Magneto's powers, you could write an encyclopedia about the bullshit Magneto can do. Now I love how no, he just moves metal around in this and can occasionally fly. Like they stick to everyone having like one or two signature moves and leave it to that.
Yeah, no one. That's the thing that caught me really rewatching X2. No one seems super duper overpowered except for probably Professor X. And that's coupled with the fact that he's in a wheelchair and he still can be bested by other mutants.
Yeah.
Like in this one, as cool as that action scene with Nightcrawler was, later on we realized like, oh, he's scared to teleport into certain spots because you could end up in a wall and die. Wolverine, when he has his big action fight, you just assume Wolverine is a guy who can kick any ass, but he even has a hard time in that battle. All the characters are limited in this movie, despite having fantastic powers. There's a little bit of a throttle on everyone that really amps up the stakes.
I think so. I mean, not to jump ahead movies, but eventually we'll get to kind of like full throttle X-Men powers, and we get to see essentially comic book Magneto doing stuff and Apocalypse and whatnot, and it's makes for great visuals, but ultimately it's kind of weightless, and I think you even run into that a little bit with some of the MCU movies. I don't want to compare them too much, but
yeah.
And
I mean, it doesn't even really need to be said, but I think all three of us are hardcore fans of the MCU. We should know them, but we still love those movies.
Oh, it's my porn. But I
speaking of which, Nightcrawler!
Yay! I think there's something comedy Nightcrawler too, but I do think there's something to be said about holding back and just going with like the basics. It grounds it. It makes the powers sound silly, more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Than just kind of being unfiltered and being able to do anything. Like it still feels like they're bound to some form of physics.
Yeah. So as long as Nightcrawler's on screen, I'm going to jump points here. It took 9 hours to do these scenes because they had to do like a full chest and face makeup appliance with all those little raised scars. They had to do the body paint, contacts. He's got filed teeth in. I can see why Alan Cumming was always very hesitant to come back to the X-Men franchise, because none of this looks fun. This is just hours of torture while all this stuff is applied to you, and then hours later, after the movie's done, you have to have it all scrubbed and ripped off of you. It's
and apparently he and Singer fighted constantly. So
I can't blame him for that. I remember there was a lot of bad blood from Cummings after the movie came out, just with him not really wanting to have to get into all this stuff for an X3 or something. Which is such a shame, because his character is amazing. I love the character.
It's
Came back to the video game.
It's very frustrating because there's so much seeded in Nightcrawler in this movie for him to become a swashbuckling comic book Nightcrawler in a sequel. But because this is all we get, we kind of just see PTSD sad Nightcrawler, which works perfectly for the story.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I feel like he should grow into something more.
Yes.
And even what we're provided in the movie is so far away from a stock character, it makes it disappointing when he is not a main player in X3. Like in this one, we have a mutant who is clearly a mutant. He can't just blend into society. He's an acrobat. He is like a hardcore Catholic. Like, he is a character defined by faith. And this gives him a weird vantage point for when he's arguing with Storm later. It's really neat. Like, you get an entirely different philosophical view from Nightcrawler than any other character in this movie. And he's a character who still has faith and love in other people, even though the world essentially hates him and he can't blend into the world. It's like, what a cool character. You can do so much with that. And we don't get him in X3 or a lot of the other X movies until they reintroduce him in the First Class series. It's a shame. It's really a shame.
What I love about this characterization of Nightcrawler is he's a character that's very much motivated by pain and fear, but for the most part, that doesn't have anything to do with him being a mutant. He feels really good about being a mutant.
Yeah, he's very mutant positive, actually.
He is. Like, he's not like, oh, if only I didn't have 3 fingers instead of a normal man's hand. Like, he's just down with what he is. And I love that line he has about, he feels pity for normal people because they can't see how awesome he really is.
Which is
like, they're seeing a normal, boring-ass world. Hey, Iceman using his powers for convenient things. That's how I'd use my powers.
Eating ice cream, because he's Iceman.
I love how that's the sequence we get because they couldn't afford the Danger Room. Like, there's two polar opposite things. Like, we're going to have a big CGI fight scene, but instead, Iceman and Logan sharing a soda in the kitchen.
Also, God, Cyclops in full costume, but also wearing a trench coat.
I know.
Makes me so happy.
Predicting Wolverine and the X-Men.
Comic books.
Right, and now we're in one of the most iconic settings from any X-Men movie, the plastic prison they keep Magneto in. Just the circular design. Boy, I love it's futuristic without being an iStore look, which is everything kind of takes its design cues from Apple in the last few years. So it's very cool to watch something that's almost 20 years old and see how differently it presented the near future from what we really got. It's sleek without being overly polished. It's just a one-of-a-kind look in my mind.
It's very timelessly sci-fi, like kind of like a lot of moments in 2001.
Yeah, I could see that.
It looks very Logan's Run.
Yes, absolutely.
A little of that, too. All right. So any scene where you have Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart together is just going to be good. Like, they can't help but make it good. And this scene is no exception.
Those future boyfriends.
Ian McKellen's performance in this scene particularly jumps out to me because we get to see him go through this wide range of emotions. When they go back, he's kind of angry and he's taunting, but then he also realizes he's got guilt on his own end because he's given away so many secrets, and he kind of turns into fear and more anger, and he just flashes through like 5 different emotional states in 20 seconds before he gets to that big climactic, "You should have killed me when you had the chance!" That big, self-loathing, powerful statement. And what a scene, and just what an acting clinic from McKellen.
Oh, and that one sequence, McKellen gets to be all of Claremont Magneto. He gets to do every Claremont Magneto thing. He sneers at Charles and his optimism. Then he feels the terrible weight of being Magneto. Then he scolds Charles for his optimism again.
And he's
Won't do what it takes.
underlit. And he's underlit like he's fucking Faust or something.
And I like that too. He stands up to kind of get this superiority over Charles because he's stuck in the chair. I like they kind of exploited that instead of having them both sitting in chairs facing each other like the ending of X1. This time we have him peering over in some sort of superior fashion, even though he knows he's fucked up. It's a self projection that really works with the character in a situation.
Terrified Patrick Stewart is frightening.
That realization, like, oh god, what's happened?
It's like seeing your dad scared.
Gas!
We gotta get out of here!
E Honda collapses. How do you even get in there?
Brian Cox is laughing in front of a fireplace. Oh.
There you go, Cyclops. Take your action scene.
You're one.
I feel so, even in the commentaries, they mention like, yeah, we did not give Marston enough to do. Cyclops does not have a big enough role in these movies, and it's a complete waste. Which it sucks because everyone realizes it. It wasn't like it was oversight. It was just like, oh, well, it's a team movie. Someone has to get the short end of the stick.
Yeah, well, and they were in the back of their heads. It's like, well, X3 is going to be the big Cyclops movie, so it's kind of okay that we're doing this right now.
Before he was revenge written out of a movie, but more on that next commentary.
Yeah. Before Superman somehow destroyed everything.
Oof. All right, now this scene.
Oh, the greatest scene ever in a comic book movie, honestly, still to this day.
Pretty much.
By the
X2, people shit on X2, but it has some of the most iconic superhero moments out there. I would say the opening attack with Nightcrawler, Wolverine's fury in this scene is he just takes these dudes out. No holds barred. There are so many pieces of this movie that still stand out and you still remember. That it just strikes me as insane that people discount this film.
People forget that X-Men 2 was beloved for a very long time. Like, X-Men 2 and Spider-Man 2 wore the gold standard of what superhero movies could be. Like, pretty much.
Shadowcat! Yeah.
Pretty much until halfway into the MCU.
Yeah. It's only in recent years that people have attempted to alter the conversation. To change history on what the response was and where particularly the X-Men films lay in history and kind of also what their quality is.
Yeah. Well, we've had so many bad X-Men movies over the years, and this one is now so old, I think a lot of people look at it and go, oh.
Well, honestly, have we had so many bad X-Men movies over the years? There's been X3, there's been 3. Origins, and then there's been, like, Apocalypse, which is just okay. It isn't even really bad.
Apocalypse and Phoenix.
Yeah, but way before Phoenix, that already started to happen.
That's true. That's very true.
Well, it was weird being alive on the internet for that transition where between First Class and a few months after Days of Future Past came out, there was this shift. I know a lot of that has to do with like the lead up to the release of Days of Future Past was when the first round about Allegation against Singer came out, and I think that's sullied it for a lot of people, but that doesn't change the past, though.
Yeah.
You still enjoyed these movies. That's why everyone going apeshit for Logan was very cathartic. It's like, yes, you care about these characters, goddammit.
Speaking of caring about characters, Colossus!
When you were a kid, this was the greatest moments.
Like, okay, so you have
theme.
In this scene alone, you have Shadowcat's appearance and her just phasing through everyone. You get Siren. You get Colossus turning metal and then throwing people through walls. Biggest, oh shit, yes, cheer moment of the movie in my theater. And then around all that, you have Wolverine just stabbing the hell out of people.
Finally.
Holy shit, what a scene.
With his
action-wise, this is the creme de la creme. If only they had Nightcrawler.
I remember that fucking first scream Logan does whenever he stabs that guy was so terrifying. It gave the movie an R rating, so they had to cut to Bobby for a split second.
Yes. Going back to what we were saying before, I think you pointed this out, Jamie, right after Apocalypse came out, which I think really does sum up the alteration to public opinion of the X-Men movies that are pretty much just, it's not the MCU, so it's stupid, which is all it really comes down to at the end of the day. Which was with Apocalypse, oh, it's just another X-Men movie that ends with a giant portal in the sky. That thing all the X-Men movies have had, I guess?
Well, that thing that wasn't a trope until a few years later.
I mean, Avengers really was the one to set everyone's mind to the idea of, a movie that ends with a giant sky portal is bad.
Yeah, it's the MCU that did the giant sky portal thing all the time until, like, Suicide Squad and Justice League.
Suicide Squad put it in the ground, and then Justice League, like, had a priest come out and, like, forsake the ground.
So we've caught a couple of cameos from smaller mutants that won't play as big of a part in this movie. But as a younger viewer going in here, that was one of the most exciting things. Just, what cameos can I spot? When they're on the computer, what names do I recognize? Oh, there's Gambit, there's Beast. And in this scene, getting to see a couple of random mutants get to use their powers even if they don't become full-fledged cast members. So cool. As a kid, that was like all I wanted. I just wanted them to parade 20 different mutants in front of me, let me see their powers, and then roll credits.
There was apparently so much more of that they wanted to film that they just didn't have the time or budget to.
Well, this was after this, they started opening conversations of, hey, what if we did spin-off movies too? So all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, we've got hundreds of mutants. How many of those would be popular enough to have their own film?
It's weird to think that there are so many X-Men movies, and this has been such a long-running pop culture fixture, but X-Men is still really, really untapped as a concept.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I can't believe
how gigantic and like an endless canvas this universe is.
Yeah, and somehow they've never managed to pull together a Gambit movie. It took them forever to do Deadpool. Deadpool only really happened because they just leaked that FX reel, test reel. There's just so many characters that somehow never got their time to shine in these movies, which is weird because X-Men's always made a profit. So you think they'd be more adventurous and start spinning off these characters, but it just never really happened. The only one they had bravery for was Wolverine, because, it's Wolverine. He's going to sell.
Oh, Logan. Going back to the interesting changes made in adapting God Loves Man Kills, I think it's a fucking masterstroke to make military spook Stryker an amalgam of every shady military man / scientist who has ties to Logan's past.
I just want to point out the lighting and kind of the visuals that are in this scene. When Wolverine first sees Stryker has the light behind him, and every time we see Wolverine's face, he's just full of glow. Because he's essentially looking at his own personal Jesus. That's his God, the man who made him. And that bright light on his face, he's almost staring at his creator in awe. And then we get this moment where he's blocked from his creator, but he still sees his shadow on the wall, and he kind of holds his hand up to that. Which was more kind of a lucky accident. When they put the set together, they realized that light was coming through their ice wall.
That actual ice wall that they made and then actually exploded.
An important point, yeah.
In the 2000s.
What an insane thing. Yeah, no, we'll just bring in a block of ice. It'll be fine. But they didn't realize until they set it up that, you can see light through this thing still. We could set up shadows. And they kind of put that togetgether last minute just as an impromptu thought. It's
boom,
beautiful,
Wrath of
and
Khan
it says so much. So I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to point that out. And what a neat visual motif that is when Wolverine and Stryker's relationship is communicated so clearly in just the lighting, even.
It's something I think about with the school siege scene in particular. It's always amazing to me when a piece of art, particularly, I think when it's related to comic book movies, which this seems to happen a lot with, I find, where there's very kind of subtle commentary being pulled from real life. Of course, there's the mutant metaphor and stuff, blah blah blah, very obvious, and But the way it's being painted here, using like shades of 9/11 and whatnot, it's interesting that now if this movie were released today, it's governments, it's the military raiding a school for people who are different to steal children and then throw them in cages. It is incredible how prescient shit like this becomes. Like it's peering into the future and showing you an image back.
It's always unsettling how evergreen most pieces of X-Men media are.
Yeah.
It's
And become
interesting
more
to
so
me
over
that-
time, which is very sad.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too the way that the hench people are treated in this movie. So hench people might be the wrong term, but in a couple of scenes when the X-Men confront the police officers, they're very careful to show us that none of these cops have been killed.
Yeah.
Whereas when it comes to like the soldiers invading the school, they're fair game, and Wolverine can just murder those guys. And the filmmakers think that's fair. They don't want to show civilians being hurt. They don't want to show cops being hurt. But the members of the military are fair game, which is something I think, like, if you try to put that into a movie now and express that idea, people would chase you into the streets and beat you to death. The idea right now that people following old orders and being troops is a bad thing, I don't think that'd be well received by audiences. I think right now they like the idea that our soldiers are heroes, and we should always treat them with respect, even if their leaders are bad.
Well, it's incredible to think this is right after 9/11 and the government is the bad guys.
Yeah. Although they sugarcoat a little bit because the president has a moment where he can go in a better direction and he was led astray by bad actors. So did you think at any point we were going to get Cerebro that was going to be a major player in all these movies?
That thing that's not that big of a deal in the X-Men mythology.
Look
I
at
was
before
about to
the
ask
X-Men
you guys
movies.
that. Like, is Cerebro a big deal in the comics?
Cerebro is, before the X-Men movies, Cerebro was literally just a helmet on a table off to the side.
That detected mutants. It didn't supercharge Xavier's powers or anything. It's just a computer that detects mutants.
Yeah. That's something that's forgotten. So much of modern X-Men kind of concepts actually come from the movies in a lot of ways. Like, the school being a fucking school comes from the movies.
Yeah, Morrison sank his teeth into that big time.
Yeah. Like, Morrison took so many concepts from the first movie and started to apply it, and even stuff from X2 ended up making their way in.
Again, I love that visual storytelling. We see the two pills in the bottom of the beer. She slides it over because we have an undershot. You know exactly what's going on. It's fantastic. It's so
You don't
simple.
need a giant, long intrigue scene. You can get this done in about a minute and a half.
The economy of it is fantastic.
Well, I love how there was an entire sequence written where she was going to follow him back to the trailer park where he lives and do that. But they just happened to have a bathroom they built for Cyclops' origin scene that they didn't film in the first movie, but they were going to film it between movies and put it on the DVD. Because they were that determined to have Cyclops freak out in a bathroom.
The one
then when
thing
they-
Cyclops does.
And then when they decided that was a weird thing to do, they just had the set lying around, so it ended up chopping about 5 minutes off of this movie.
So technically
What
that's
do you-
happening in a high school bathroom.
Yeah, one of the weird things too, because they trashed most of the sets after the first X-Men came out. They
Yep.
apparently just had the bathroom left over, and I think Magneto's prison.
I believe Magneto's prison is redesigned, isn't it? It seems a little more grandiose.
I think
Whereas
it
it's
may
not
have
just a
been
room
altered
here.
some for filming to be easier.
Mhm.
That was a fun moment in the commentary. Somebody goes, all these sets were destroyed after the first movie. I don't know why.
Well, you think nowadays everyone's very conscious of, oh, we're doing a franchise. We're aiming for a franchise. We should probably save the sets. Like, everyone assumes they're getting a sequel. If you watch a lot of big movies now, they always end with at least 2 sequel teases. So the idea of throwing out sets now to me is insane. You just assume those go into storage for 3 or 4 years before they'd even consider throwing them apart.
Oh god, look at Fox a year or two later with Daredevil. Like, no, we have to do 5 Daredevil movies at once because there will never be a sequel.
It's actually insane. Daredevil came out this year.
Oh, was it this year? Damn.
Yep, both 2003. This was X2,
right.
Daredevil, and Hulk.
Oh man, what a
What a brave
weird
new
year.
world.
What a
God.
whiplash of just what?
And again, hey, we get the villain's powers repeated a second time, so we clearly understand what his deal is. He's got a mind control serum.
But it
And
also
even people-
illustrates something about him that he's using them as tools, slaves, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. The people he hates, he still has to use to serve his own ends, which is interesting. As much as he is disgusted by them, he can't help but survive off of them like a parasite.
So I want to mention something. We talked about during your X-Facts.
X-Facts!
You mentioned the writers, and one name you left out was Zach Penn.
That is true, yeah.
Poor Zach Penn.
Oh, poor Zach
Wikipedia doesn't
Penn.
have him listed.
Who's not credited on this movie for kind of weird Writers Guild reasons. The Writers Guild just decided he shouldn't be credited for the final film in any real way. Very puzzling. So the writing process was, I believe it was either just Singer and Hader came up with a treatment. Pretty much just the spine of the movie, and then Hader and Penn both went off to write separate scripts based on that treatment. So they're writing the same story, and they were still actually collaborating back and forth, but they're both writing kind of like two alternate reality versions of the same thing. And
Which we should point out isn't actually that unusual. Studios all the time are like, hey, here's a story we want to go with. Let's hand this out to like 5 different people and see which script works.
Yeah, it's not like, and
Spider-Man
still,
4 had that same thing too. Well, they're also developing Amazing Spider-Man.
yeah, and this was a case of the writers, everybody was still working together. You know, it wasn't like what Fox would later get into, which I'll explain in a second. But Singer picked Penn's script. Now, Penn's script was pretty much this, save for a couple bits. The biggest, of course, being there were Sentinels in it. Cerebro was only really needed to do the targeting system for the Sentinels. And at the end, Jean would have destroyed the Sentinel factory instead of drowning in the lake. It would still have destroyed the dam and whatnot. Sentinels would have attacked the school and stuff like that, and you can find designs for them. It's very well documented. You can see the concept art and whatnot for the Sentinels, which would have transformed like these rolling wheels and then unfurled into giant robots. It's actually kind of a cool design.
Oh yeah, I've always really liked those.
I'm still sad they
wasn't
didn't use a version of them for Days of Future Past in any way, but
Well, wasn't there like a brief moment where they were still gonna have one Sentinel who was gonna rip off the door to Cerebro, and then Singer and the crew just kind of looked around and said, "That's really anticlimactic. Let's not do that."
yeah, it was just because they just really wanted a Sentinel in there, and they just axed it. So, and somehow, and of course, Doherty and Harris would come on to work on the script for the final version. So Penn just wrote that one draft, and then it was altered, and then Budget, of course, took it down a lot. I mean, that was still the script that would have like a big fight between Toad and Nightcrawler, and a bunch of other shit.
Cool.
And some of Hader's ideas made its way over, and things changed more and more. And then somehow the Writers Guild would end up striking Penn's name from the final version, despite the fact his script was the one that was being used.
Weird.
And a lot of unfilmed stuff that they weren't able to do for one reason or another, like Angel being in the movie, being held in Weapon X and whatnot, was from Penn's script that just didn't make it to the screen just for budgetary reasons.
Angel being turned into Archangel via Weapon X is honestly kind of a better way to go about that than Apocalypse. It does make more sense for that design. Like, oh, that's why he has metal wings.
Fun fact, Jamie. Technically, that's also true of the comics.
No metal. No
I'm not going to
metal.
go into Claremont original ideas, though. Let's
We'll
just say
be here all series.
Everyone
let
shut
me
up.
just-
It's one of the coolest moments in Magneto's history.
hold on. I just want to say one joke. Let's just say if you look at the first time Wolverine met Archangel, he said he smelled something familiar,
Something sinister.
something apocalyptic. No, but Apocalypse is who the Doctor is on the phone during the Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X. But anyway,
Get it? Because it's all coming together.
comic books are stupid. So this scene,
Holy shit! What a
movie could have just
glorious
ended after
moment.
this, and I would have been happy.
Ah, too much iron in your blood.
What I love is everyone on message boards in like 2001 knew this was probably how Magneto was going to break out, but nobody ever predicted he would pull fucking liquid metal out of somebody's blood to make ball bearings.
This is a surprisingly R-rated kind of detail, right? You can
It's
see the blood
brutal.
on this goddamn ball.
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
his reflection dying in the ball bearing would not be in a movie today.
No.
That
There's a
movie.
lot of surprisingly kind of adult and bold choices going on in these early X-Men films.
Oh, yeah.
Plus, just my imagination, just picturing getting struck by a ball bearing being launched like that. Fuck, God, damn, that would hurt. And this
And
just
Magneto's signature weapon.
the sublime moment where Magneto escapes from prison on a metal disc as he shoots ball bearings around to murder his prisoners.
Look at that.
Like, crosses
That's
his
Ian
arms,
McKellen.
too.
Famed actor
Ah.
Ian McKellen.
Look at this comic book splash page.
God,
And the
I'm-
wind cried Magnus.
Boy, I don't think you can make Magneto more cool than that scene.
I love how when it came time for Claremont to write the novelization for X-Men 2, there was an entire backstory to that scene where Magneto was like forced to make ball bearings for the Nazis at Auschwitz. So him creating the ball bearings to once again be freed from bondage was this big symbolic victory. And that pissed Michael Doty off so much. God damn it. That's
I
so
love how
much cooler.
Geordie's the one who loves it too.
That would have been so cool. Why didn't we talk?
All right, so back to back, we have Magneto escaping, and then what some people would say is a very on-the-nose scene, but I feel like if you're doing X-Men,
You have to.
you have to do this scene.
And I love
The
how
way-
it's just fuck it. We're going for it.
Yeah, the parents have to find out their son is coming out as a mutant. His brother is so upset he calls the cops and destroys the family. For some reason, the cat is still there as human, comic relief. I don't know why.
It sells you on the reality of the situation.
They
I
like the
guess.
cat.
But just even some of these super, super dumb, tone-deaf lines, like, have you tried not being a mutant?
I do wish that was cut. It's like, at that point, it's like, yes, you're doing the gay thing. We know. We
I
figured
love
that
how
out.
that's in there though. Like just
I would go with
I
Mike on
think
this
you need
one.
I think you should go all the way.
Like, this scene is not subtle in the first place, so I don't mind the inclusion of that line. They're really beating a dead horse almost, and how obvious a lot of it is. But
It's
I also
obvious,
don't
but
think
it's
that's the
real.
problem. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. And wow, we are really just stringing shit together. Okay, so we had the Magneto escape, then we had the coming out scene, and then we get this scene where they slow the movie down to get like a philosophical conversation between Storm and Nightcrawler,
Which is
I think
almost a Nightcrawler commenting on the last scene.
There's a bit where some people were saying, oh, they're doing this to try and set up a future relationship between these two characters, but obviously that doesn't pan out just due to screen time in future films. But now this goes back to the comments I was saying earlier. X1 works because we have a lot of kind of battle of ideas. This character believes X, the other character believes Y, and they have to talk these things out. They can't just punch each other for a victor. And in this situation, even in the team of good guys, we have to have this conversation and have these characters hash out ideas of how they think they should move forward and what the right thing is. They're just not automatically right because they're the good guys. They still have to find their own footing in this world. and they get an outsider perspective from Nightcrawler, which is surprisingly upbeat and positive of the world that reviles him. Whereas Storm, the beautiful woman who really could blend in with society if she wanted to, she doesn't have to make storms and give herself away. She's the one that's angry at humans. And I love that kind of role reversal of what you'd expect. And the fact they actually have these two characters sit down to discuss their differences, and they don't clearly say this person's right and this one's wrong at this time.
And the X-Men aren't a one-unit viewpoint. Every member of the team has different viewpoints on the mutant agenda, as it were.
And it is a nice way of playing up on stuff that was present in Storm's characterization in the first movie, but not really given much room to wiggle around. I'm very curious how much of this was in the original cut of the movie before they reshot more scenes with Storm after Halle Berry won the Oscar.
Because
it's weird. There were apparently extensive reshoots, but Storm's also still a relatively small part of this movie, so it makes me wonder, like, was there less of Storm at one point? Like, were they trying to diminish Halle Berry's role in the sequel after people being very very tepid on her in the first movie, and then just completely go the other way?
Halle Berry also did demand more to do.
Yeah, in the commentary they mentioned, though, for the reshoots, they didn't like thinking of them as reshoots because a lot of it was really just adding a couple of bits onto existing scenes, not tearing apart everything they'd already filmed. So a lot of it was just them going back and adding, a couple extra lines of dialogue or maybe a small action beat on top of what already existed.
Yeah, pretty basic stuff, it sounded like.
Yeah, I don't think anything too extremely out of the norm. I mean, most movies have reshoots anyways.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned this in commentaries before. Like, the internet needs to just unbuckle its asshole about reshoots.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so going back to a point we made earlier about the X-Men not being uber-powered in this film, we just saw Wolverine take a bullet to the head, which we know is covered in an impenetrable metal, and he has to spend several minutes down on the ground for that bullet to pop out of his head and him to regen and get back up. Which you could say is a plot contrivance to get the rest of the scene to play out the way it does with Pyro attacking people. But again, I like the idea that it shows that even Wolverine, the most badass of the X-Men, can get taken down by some no-name cop for a couple of minutes if the story presents that opportunity.
Shouldn't his memory be erased now?
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to start over with Wolverine. This is a new man.
Well, I like that because it is a small dose of reality to a character whose powers are very ridiculous. Like, no, he would absolutely have brain trauma from that impact, and it would take a few minutes for everything to be rewired.
Yeah. Also, we'd be remiss without commenting on the practical effects bonanza that just happened.
Oh, the guys on wires who just get flipped around trees by fireballs and stuff. It's amazing.
That sells Pyro's power. It makes it so, because CGI fire, especially back then, is fucking difficult. So being able to marry it together with these real effects, but also makes Pyro's power feel actually devastating instead of just CGI stuff happening everywhere.
This is this movie's version of Magneto dropping the cars.
Yeah.
For sure.
And the cinematographer almost died.
Yeah, also that. We also get a cutaway shot of Bobby's brother seeing all of this, his worst fear play out of just fireballs destroying police officers. Which is kind of an interesting point. I've always thought it was very weird that in this scene, the character who steps up to deal with the threat is not really that important to the plot. Pyro just gets this scene to decide, I'm going to become one of the members of the bad guy team. But Bobby's friends and family are right there. It almost seems like it would have been more interesting to make him have to do that. Obviously, you don't want to push Bobby towards being a bad guy, but if this was the time where he had to choose to defend himself and his family seeing that, there's a lot of drama you could wring out of that situation. Instead, he kind of becomes a secondary player, and we get this parting shot of his family looking down on him as he runs away.
I kind of like that, though. I like how Pyro's entire motivation and his reasoning eventually to go with Magneto is these people are scared children. somebody has to actually take the reins and do things. I like how you don't really see that from Bobby until the very end.
Hey, Bobby's actually very reserved throughout the entire movie until the end.
Which is interesting because his plot feels like it should be driving the movie. Instead, it's like a glorified subplot. You know, he's got the B story that they don't focus as much on.
Well, pretty much everything with Pyro, Rogue, and Bobby is clearly supposed to be a very big deal in the third movie. Which did not exactly happen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. There's so much. It's sad to look back at X2 and see so many building blocks that Tom Rothman would later destroy out of pettiness.
So, from my understanding of the way this story originally played out, in these scenes, Professor X was going to use his powers to overcome Jason and escape the prison. He was going to gather up Cyclops, and then we're going to go back to the mansion. And then it was all going to be revealed as him still being under the control of Jason. So it was a big psych out that ran for like a whole scene.
Yeah.
Which, in retrospect, really good thing they didn't do.
Yeah.
Because that seems, one, probably confusing. Two, it would have padded out a movie that's already plenty long. And this works just as well. Like, we know what's happening the moment we see the girl with the two different colored eyes, because we've already seen that from Jason. And we don't need to complicate that at all. We don't need to know that Professor X's mind has been clouded, because we already know that. We got it in 2 seconds when he sees a little girl and goes, yep, I better help out in this weird situation I don't understand.
Well, it also, like, the two different versions of that sequence imply completely different things to the audience. In the version in the final cut, you just get the impression that Xavier is in a dream state and working on dream logic. He's not entirely lucid. In the expanded version, it just comes across that Xavier is being tricked.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would make the audience disconnect with that character immediately.
Very much so, yeah.
As it is, you feel sorry for Xavier. You would just be mad at Xavier in that version.
It makes Xavier look like an idiot, unfortunately.
And being outsmarted by a 10-year-old girl.
Though it would have had more Cyclops, at least, even if it was Dream Cyclops.
Well, it gets messy at the end, too, when Magneto essentially reprograms Jason to tell him, oh no, we're going to find and kill the humans now. Like, that doesn't quite jive with the idea of him.
I mean, it's in Xavier's character.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, in all these years, I've never noticed Xavier threatens Wolverine at the beginning with being an 8-year-old girl, and is then later corrupted by an 8-year-old girl. Tables
Fucking
turn.
comeuppance there.
No!
Also, this sequence is very cool. One comment about the little girl, though, which amuses me, which is Michael Dougherty talking about her and just saying, you know, I like horror a lot, so I just found a creepy little girl to be fun to write. Like, oh, little do you know your future. Your grand future.
It's amazing seeing baby-faced Michael Dougherty talk about his first big break on this X-Men movie.
Oh, this entire movie is pretty much made by 12-year-olds. It's weird.
17 years, man. 17 years. Like this, going back to what I said before, they went out of their way to show that these pilots survived their encounter. For some reason, there's a clear cutoff. The guys working for Stryker are all damned. But other
these are just
general
people...
enforcement are okay.
Yeah. These are people just enforcing things. They don't really have any...
They're doing their jobs.
Yeah.
The X-Men appear very dangerous in this scene. They're in a Black Ops jet.
I mean, the first jet fighter did give them the option to land and end all this properly without missiles. So, you know, I guess they did a decent job showing that those guys were innocent.
Oh, you mean Carol Danvers? So I believe this movie was the first feature film to portray female fighter pilots, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, they talk about that in the commentary. They were surprised and proud.
Storm is the first female fighter jet pilot, I think.
Well, I think they're talking about like some of the other fighter pilots attacking them were played by women.
No, I remember Storm being specifically pointed out by name. So I think it was a particular kind of aircraft. Progressive either way.
So this is a question I've been batting around in my head since first seeing this movie so many years ago. So you think Magneto and Mystique were just walking through the woods, saw that overhead, and thought, "Oh, thank God that we don't have to walk all the way out." What a fucking boon this is to our plan.
You would have to assume Magneto would have taken out a couple pieces of metal to just transport them along in some sort of metal carriage. A car he's just pushing with his mind through the woods.
Look how pimp Magneto looks.
Holding his helmet. I love how obsessed this movie is with Magneto holding his helmet.
The X-Men movies are not thought of as loving the more comic booky aspects, but they kind of do if you actually pay close attention. Everybody has insignias, and everybody's fucking in love. The movie's in love with people's costuming and shit.
Oh, it picks up on the awesome Magneto thing of his helmet being specifically a weapon and not just a part of his costume.
Yeah.
You can only put it on when he's doing Magneto business.
I also love the slight design
otherwise.
change.
Ruins my hair.
Oh, yeah. This is maximum X-Men right here. They're just camping in the woods and debating things with Magneto. But is he friend or foe?
It's
not to get on my
bad.
X-Men fan fucking soapbox here, but fuck anybody
Chris.
who says these movies aren't. Yes, they are super not comic accurate in some regards, but honestly, no more than a lot of other ones. And they get the essence of it so strong that a lot of details I don't think matter as much. It doesn't really matter that they're not wearing spandex, or Wolverine doesn't have a mask on, or this doesn't exactly line up, and this other thing doesn't line up, and stuff like that. This is X-Men through and through.
Spiritually, it's X-Men. Honestly,
Wolverine's too tall. It's not true to the comics.
I've never quite gotten that complaint because one of my favorite things about this series is the weird backwards version of X-Men continuity we get.
Yeah.
I like that there's a version of the X-Men universe where Iceman and Rogue are a thing. It's especially becomes fascinating when we go to First Class, where we get just apeshit versions of all of those characters.
I think that stuff's fun.
Makes them better in a certain way. Yeah.
Also, I love how just every time it cuts to Magneto, it's just bare boobs.
And it's Ian McKellen, too, so it's funny.
Oh, Nightcrawler is having fun.
Kurt is so terrified he's in trouble. Oh no, she's going to wipe my mind like Zatanna. Also, going back to comic book shit, I love how obsessed the writers are within this particular movie with Magneto and Logan just having their comic book relationship. Where Magneto respects the fact that Logan is a loyal soldier, but is annoyed by his very existence.
It is a very specific relationship, and they really ground it in perfectly.
And Logan's totally got his thing of, yeah, I met guys like you, not impressed. You gonna put on your pajamas again, Nito? So here we go into
calling him Nito just seems wrong.
It sounds insulting. It sounds a little bit like a racial slur, but I don't know how.
I don't like it.
Against
regardless.
Masters of Magnetism. I believe it was Michael Dougherty who called this their Star Wars scene, specifically their Empire Strikes Back scene.
They're inside a giant space slug right now.
I do love how Logan gets this one moment to just be Han Solo. I honestly feel like this moment is the closest Wolverine gets to being an actual Hollywood leading man.
Yeah.
Still awkward because he's kissing someone who's like not 100% on board. I am not a fan of the love triangle they set up in these films. I know it was like a major point. They built a lot off of it, but it just feels weird to me.
It's very unexplored. It kind of has that 90, at least in the first film, it kind of has that 90s movie thing of these characters are in love now. Just let's just keep going. Trinity and Neo are in love forever. Just it's not important.
Yeah. Well, this scene was also for the most part kind of the button on it. It's just Jean essentially going like
wagging his tail.
Yeah, it's Jean essentially going, "Yeah, I'm into you, but just kind of physically."
Well, it's in both the first movie and in X-Men 2, there is more stuff, like more Jean-focused stuff that does go into her attraction to Wolverine and does establish very much that it's mutual and that it's tied in with her Phoenix powers rising into her.
Yeah.
It's all on the cutting room floor. Like, it was fascinating hearing Dougherty talk about, like, as far as he's concerned, her attraction to Wolverine is almost 100% just a reflection of her powers. Like, the Phoenix is her version of the Berserker rage, like, inside them, and that's what the two of them are attracted to in each other.
Can someone explain to me why Mystique cannot transform away her scars?
Because movie.
This seems like a thing he probably should have figured out pretty fast with his super senses. He just shouldn't have to like, oh, there's bumps.
He was
here.
really horny.
Yeah.
And yeah, I imagine the attraction to Wolverine stuff would have played out in a more he wants to fuck Stryker, a more sensible way, especially with how it ended up being portrayed in Last Stand. It was being set up to be played much differently with the Phoenix manifestation.
Yeah. Also, I love how there was a version of that scene where Wolverine was just like, "No, like this," and then he just fucked Mystique as Jean.
Yeah, Hader wanted Wolverine to fuck Mystique as Jean, and everyone said no.
I think Hader even said I don't think it's on the commentary, but in some, I remember somewhere, I could not find it again. Hader's watching that scene and says, "I just want everyone to know this is as far as I wrote this scene. Everything after this point is someone else."
A likely story, Hader.
I think it would have been greater if Wolverine just fucked Mystique as Mystique.
I know.
Because honestly, though, Magneto would have been... No, I imagine they have a very open relationship.
It seemed like even the filmmakers weren't sure what the relationship status was between Mystique and Magneto.
I'm honestly a little disappointed that they turned up the subtext to the point where they're almost certainly fucking in the prequel movies. Because I kind of like the idea of this Magneto being gay and Mystique just being his gal pal. I mean, they love what Rogue did with her hair.
What? Isn't that a weird line? Because we get that really catty line reading from Magneto, and then he turns and has this very deep conversation with Pyro, like, "You're a god among insects." And essentially just takes this guy under his wing in this scene after being a really huge dick seconds prior to someone else from his squad.
And I love how that was McKellen's call. Like, the line apparently was just, "I love what you've done with your hair." It's supposed to be, very sinister Magneto-like. And McKellen just wanted to gay it up.
I will say,
it's so confusing because Rogue wasn't even the one who fucked up his plans. She was just around. If anything, he should be catty to fucking Wolverine or Cyclops.
If you have ever talked to an old gay man, they will turn on a dime like that.
It also it's just so fun to see Magneto and Mystique being catty in the corner. Because that's the only person Mystique talks to. She's just sarcastic to everybody else and doesn't speak.
She had a nice little moment with Nightcrawler.
And Magneto then just drops double entendres about her all the time. Also, yes, the scene with Nightcrawler earlier was not just we're just going to reference the fact that Mystique is her mother. Like, no, they were going to build on that later. We
were going to build on this later, the movie.
Pretty much.
I'm sorry, if I can go back a second. Mental image. Magneto with a raging hard-on just going, too much iron in my blood.
Oh.
And then he lifts it up with his magnetic powers.
Don't need Viagra.
Dun, dun.
Da, da, da. He has
Mystique turns into Charles.
I was about to say Magneto has like a little tiny version of the helmet that he puts on his junk for like a condom. Protects me from thought powers and children.
Protects me from the real bad guys. AIDS. It's a commercial.
But Charles, how did he know? How does he know to resist your asshole? He helped me discover it.
Then somehow a speech about where Juggernaut comes into it, and it's very disturbing and incestuous.
When are we going to get a major superhero sponsoring Trojan brand condoms? When are they going to have an ad campaign together? Like a Captain America sponsored condom?
I could see U.S. agents fucking hawking condoms. Wrap that rascal for America.
I'm going to be real sad when that's not a thing that happens.
Also, I don't know why, but Hugh Jackman playing this vaguely dainty amuses the shit out of me.
The way he uses his hands is really interesting.
Like, oh, well.
Like the spread fingers just kind of up, does his little waves and stuff. Visually, they want you to know what's going on here, and I think we all picked up on it the moment it started happening in the theaters. Not that we're super observant, it's just they're making this very obvious.
And then Stryker notices immediately.
Which is nice when the villain and the audience are on the same level. It's always annoying when the audience is like 2 steps ahead of the bad guy.
This is a very cool scene.
I think this is what established to me like the Mystique fighting style. Her sliding between those doors while flipping people off. Her jump as she transforms. We definitely got moments of that in the first movie. But this one sells how unique her fighting style is compared to anyone else.
It's nothing you really see.
Brian Cox.
Yeah, it's nothing you see in other movies either, which is great. Mystique is such a science. Mystique is such a specific fighter. I'd like to see more of that style picked up in other action films.
Yeah.
And apparently there's even more of it. Like at one point she uses a guy as a human shield, and after he's dead, she kisses him and then throws him at somebody.
Wasn't that Rebecca Romaine's idea too?
Yep, it's that and the finger. All idea.
So I was talking earlier about how bad I felt for Alan Cumming just to go through his Nightcrawler costume, but that doesn't really compare to what Rebecca Romaine had to do every single day. Just the head-to-toe makeup, pretty much being naked for all of it. She was working on other projects at this time too, so they described in the commentary. She would have to essentially fly into Canada for a day of filming, and most of that would be being put into makeup. Do a full day of shooting, get all the makeup taken off, jump on an airplane, and go right back to the States for more filming on a different movie.
And it's winter in Canada.
And I feel like she's like Tobias in season 2 of Arrested Development. There's just splotches of blue paint all over her apartment. Just a handprint on the door.
But hey, at least they got it down to it only taking 5 hours to apply.
Yeah. Woo! But I remember Alan Cumming did an interview where he was talking about this movie, and one of the things he was bummed out about was whenever he had to do like the full makeup deal, he couldn't have lunch with the other actors because they were terrified he was going to rub his makeup off if he used a napkin or something. So basically it was him and Halle Berry having to sit at their own trailers while everyone else got to eat together, and him just eating his lunch through a straw by himself.
There
I
is
can kind of see why he was so hesitant to return to the franchise.
some actors just aren't built for, you know, the kind of makeup stuff. There is a funny behind the scenes thing. It just shows you how fragile this kind of makeup is. It's the makeup tests for Nightcrawler, which is fucking terrifying also because it's just like a bunch of people dressed like in Nightcrawler makeup, like all standing in a circle. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ. But it's they're trying to figure out the shade, and Singer's like trying to like change the shade darker and completely like rips the makeup by just like touching it. It's like every day filming with like one of these people in this full body makeup must have just been terrifying. Just if they bump into something wrong, you're setting yourself back hours.
And last commentary, we talked about Mystique's ass exploding.
All I know is they really should have just cast Derek Mears as Nightcrawler. Just have a big, beefy, tough Nightcrawler.
Jesus, that would be incredible.
A Nightcrawler that could fuck you.
Nightcrawler teleports into the room. Stops teleporting because he can just beat you to death with his hands.
Just all abs.
Wonder Bar.
But he still has the Derek Mears mustache.
I laugh about this, but if Hollywood wanted to steal that idea, it's yours. Go ahead.
Derek Mears is every character. He's Deathstroke.
Just give us a big fucking beefy Nightcrawler Derek Mears. Any character that's just caked in makeup, fuck it, go ahead and make it Derek Mears. Give that poor man steady work.
Make him the next Perlman.
Oh, we haven't pointed out the fact that the actor playing Jason is the fucking corpse from Seven. His sloth.
The other Doug Jones.
Look at physical performance too, they noted in the commentary. You don't think about it, but he is sitting in a wheelchair with like pads on him to make him slouch forward, and he has to play it almost completely emotionless and still, which is more challenging than you'd assume. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd be very uncomfortable. I just want to fidget in that chair. I would have a hard time pulling off these looks day in, day out. Like, it just, I don't know. I'd be cracking smiles. I would get thrown out of the chair in like 2 days.
Your like muscles are going to start tensing up. It'll just try not to twitch.
Yeah, it's amazing how much character he can get through without actually having to say a single word.
This little girl grew up to be Jude Law.
Wow.
Recognize the chin.
Fun little fact there.
That's an X fact for the fans.
I did not realize until years afterwards. This is totally supposed to be Mastermind.
Yep.
Which is such an interesting take on that character. Like, let's literally rip away everything about him, make him lobotomized, and just adapt the powers, which actually kind of works perfectly for Mastermind. There's something very terrifying about a character who can create intricate, very psychological illusions, but is just an empty husk himself. Which is kind of subtext with Jason Wingard usually, but I love how it's just literal in this version.
And also, in that last shot, we got again, because Cerebro is just a character, we get foil Cerebro, like the hollowed out, crappy looking, chunky version of Cerebro.
Dark Cerebro.
Dark Cerebro.
That's sinister panels.
The Guiji of the Cerebro universe.
Oh, you were saying, Mike?
Oh, I was going to say, it also ups the ante on kind of how powerful Stryker is, that he has that kind of power at his disposal as just, a slave.
I got more cattiness from Magneto.
So long, Cyclops! Ah!
Another great Magneto thing, just being casually amused by the fact that Jean and Scott are a happy couple. Oh, look at the lovebirds over there.
Okay, here's a question. Nightcrawler, why did you have to bamf in the most terrifying way possible?
Boo, I'm in the shadows, boogity.
God, the alternate version of that take is even worse, where it's like just he's in darkness and you just see the eyes.
Yeah, but that's a very comic book panel look for Nightcrawler.
Oh yeah,
Kitty Pryde just runs out screaming.
you could leave at any time.
I love how, at the end of the day, Stryker's undoing is the very questionable decision to put his secret lab in a dam. God, did that bite him in the ass immediately.
You have to be careful where you put your fucking secret villain hideout.
People should have
Look at
learned
every
that from
Bond
James
villain.
Bond. Dr. No taught it right away. His middle hands couldn't climb his own ladders. Yeah, don't put your evil lair inside an active volcano. Don't put it anywhere that could easily flood. There's just a lot of bad spots to put your evil lair, and you'd think bad guys would have this on lock by now.
Oh, are we getting to the most wonderful Brian Cox scene in history? Him just looking at dials and meters like he's at the bottom of a submarine.
No! Everything
I
Brian
think-
Cox does in this movie is sublime.
I think they say in the commentary, like, they intentionally singled that out as their Captain Nemo scene. Like, that's the vibe they wanted to go for. Oh, poor Hawkeye Cyclops.
I love how everybody picked extra colors for their costumes, but Cyclops was like, no, I just want the one. Very
Black's
Cyclops move.
I will say, like, the costumes in the first movie, like, are objectively not very good. Like, not from a design standpoint so much as just, yes, my submarine. Not really from a design standpoint, but just from materials and just kind of how they look on screen. Like we said, like, nobody on set was happy with how that turned out. I actually really like the X2 costumes. They've
Oh,
got
I adore these outfits. Yeah.
They're just stylized enough. They've got a good they've got like little touches of their comic book looks kind of hidden in there, especially with Wolverine.
Oh yeah, I love
Also-
Wolverine's outfit.
Also, Storm is at this point is just wearing her comic book costume.
Pretty
doesn't
much.
It just doesn't have skin showing. That's the
Yeah.
only difference.
That's something that people I think overlook is like, no, that's kind of just Storm's outfit. I also really love this kind of the 70s pants on Wolverine. Like I really like some of the retro stuff they throw in here because the comic originated in the 60s and the 70s. So they do add a little bit of retro to some of the set design, some of the costuming, but blend it very seamlessly. I think it creates a really unique look.
Honestly, yeah, I think if they just made the leather a very dark blue, it would have been perfect. Like
Yeah.
like there, that's just the X-Men team costumes.
Oh, definitely. Even the Weapon X room here is just something from a weird mad scientist comic book story circa like 1965.
Mike, how mind-blowing was it as a child to see Wolverine, the real Wolverine in a movie, walk through the Weapon X room and
Oh,
see
see his
the
claw
Wolverine tank?
marks on the walls.
There's something specifically about the fact that he still is in a tank.
Yes, the way
A
it should
mad
be.
science
Goddammit.
tank. God.
Just screaming, covered in blood.
His hands never more itchy.
So itchy. Later, this scene would be adapted where he just leaves.
And still has his memory. It's very confusing.
So long, chumps.
Just think, up until that movie was stricken from continuity, it was just canon that this version of Wolverine's first memory was seeing a dead Lynn Collins on 3 Mile Island and then just walking into the wilderness.
And not trusting Gambit.
Like, I think we should actually talk about that a little bit because this movie's handling of Wolverine's origin rendered this moot as soon as it was released. But the threat of this movie revealing Wolverine's origin before the comics changed comic continuity forever.
Yep. The post the first X-Men movie, rumors, pretty much mostly unfounded rumors, honestly. It really had nothing to do with any development of this actual movie, but it was rumored that a sequel to X-Men would reveal where Wolverine's full origin. At this point, Marvel was coming out of bankruptcy, thanks to this, and there was constant meetings in, of all places, I swear to God, Joe Quesada's basement. That's where all the Marvel people would get together and have meetings, and like the writers and stuff, and would have pitch meetings. And it was fucking terrifying to everybody, the concept of Wolverine's origin being revealed outside of the comics. So it was pitched like, we need a big thing to like catapult Marvel back into the stratosphere. Because we're nothing right now. We almost stopped existing about a year and a half ago. So we need something big, and we need to beat this to the punch, so why don't we do a Wolverine origin comic? After several hours of everyone arguing that should never be a thing, and they would all quit if that ever happened, it was eventually decided it would be okay, and to go for it, and that ended up being the graphic novel Origin.
Which is kind of fallen by the wayside. Like, I think to this day, fans still seem pretty divided on it. Mike and I are huge fans of that Paul Jenkins and Andy Kubert book. Like, it's like, go seek it out. You can find the trade easily. It's not at all what you would expect a Wolverine origin comic to be, and that's what makes it absolutely excellent. I think it's one of the best graphic novels in the X-Men library.
Oh, by large, it's definitely one of the best. Marvel does not have a lot of like prestige graphic novels. I find that's up there. Like that's their fucking year one, Dark Knight Returns, blah blah blah. It's like a Dickens story too. Like it's something you would not expect. And that's what's great is the story of how that book came about. To later see stuff from Origin adapted into the movies. Like it's kind of
some cases hilariously.
Yeah, very hilariously. Son, we'll get there.
We're brothers, James. Brother.
But it's this cool
You're
circular
Logan
thing.
now.
Like even just his name still being James Howlett in Logan.
Yeah.
Also, God, this death is fucking brutal.
Once again, this is a PG-13 movie.
A bit surprising too, because this happens. The essentially main henchman has been taken out of the film with 37 minutes to go. A bit of a surprise. Like you kind of assume, like, oh, is she going to come back just made of lead in a later part of this film?
Yeah, there's no more fights.
Oh, it actually has a very similar structure in that regard to God Loves Man Kills, where the purifiers are taken out before the final confrontation, and then the ending is just a philosophical argument between the X-Men and Stryker.
Yeah, on stage.
Before the whole novelization of this movie, like these characters were all given so much more time before they were killed by their own grenades going off.
Oh, Claremont.
Going
back to Deathstrike. Going back to
that's where I was going to go.
Going back to Deathstrike for a moment. Hader revealed that Deathstrike. I don't know if Deathstrike was in Penn's version, but I don't think so. It was originally his underling from God Loves Man Kills. But she would have been revealed during kind of this scene, revealed to be a mutant, and Stryker would have then taken her out in disgust. Like she would secretly have been a mutant the entire time. Apparently Singer decided that, well, if you're making her a mutant, let's throw her... We don't have a lot of other mutants to be bad guys or for people to fight or to be like any kind of physical threat. So throw in like let's throw in a cool mutant there to be like Stryker's underling. Like we have the mind control thing, so let's just do that. And that's how she grew into Deathstrike, which this Deathstrike, of course, has no bearing on comic book Deathstrike at all, other than her name's still Yukio and shit like that. But I do find it interesting that it's mentioned briefly in the commentary. I forget who says it, but it's the moment she's killed by Wolverine. He's kind of horrified, and you see her eyes change as kind of the mind control thing goes away. It was their idea that even though this version doesn't have any ties to Wolverine, that this version of Deathstrike was just a normal person. Like maybe just like a housewife or a mother or something like that. That Stryker just found out she had these powers and kidnapped her and turned her into like a living weapon like Wolverine. And just there's an added sadness to what Stryker's done to her as far as her being a mutant is concerned, that she's not like comic book Deathstrike where she has this vendetta and all this. She's just a thing to Stryker.
And as long as we're talking about Deathstrike, what I find interesting here is we've had a lot of Wolverine parallels and foils for villains throughout the X series. It's not like every time X-Men go against a villain, they have to fight their own Wolverine. But in the first movie, there's Sabretooth, who is essentially, a bigger, dumber Wolverine. X2, we get the Silent Lady Deathstrike, who is kind of a dark path for Wolverine. If he'd stayed part of the program, if he hadn't escaped the Weapon X thing, he could have been her. Later on in X-Men Origins, we get Sabretooth again with more personality and tighter ties to Wolverine. We eventually get Logan, where Logan fights an actual clone of himself. Throughout a lot of these films, if Wolverine is your main character, it's not a stretch to assume that the villain is going to be some sort of shadow image of Wolverine. Which goes along with it, because in most movies, Wolverine is trying to figure out something about his identity. So it makes sense he should have to fight a form of himself to get to that bit of insight he's looking for.
That's why I've always given these movies a pass in that. Like, it's such a superhero cliche in both comics and especially in movies of, the hero has to fight his opposite number every single time. We have to see two people with the same powers mime at each other.
If it's an origin, that's how it is.
But with the case of Wolverine, like, that does kind of cut to the core of Wolverine. At the end of the day, his arch enemy is the darkest part of himself. And all of his greatest foes, like Sabretooth and Deathstrike, represent things like that.
And it's such a strong illustration of how violent that internal battle inside of him is when it's externalized in an actual battle, I think. I think it's just different when it's played with Wolverine.
So going back to Deathstrike, what you were saying for a moment, I do like how these movies are 2 for 2 with Wolverine enemies that aren't allowed to speak, because if they did, it would complicate the movie 10,000. Like, it's like having Cable show up and not talk. Like, this is just gonna save us like 30 pages of script. Also, returning to this movie's handling of Wolverine's origin, I remember there was so much anxiety about this from the fans, because I know what the big kicker that was like driving that like drove a lot of the buzz was there was a script, and Mike and I like looked into this. We still can't confirm or deny if this was actually one of David Hayter's original drafts or just some fan fiction that got put on the front page of IGN, because that happened a lot back then. But there was a script floating around where you would see Wolverine in high school, like in the 60s, which would have been so bizarre. And also Xavier, and also Juggernaut would break Magneto out of prison, which I'm convinced that rumor is where they got the idea for Juggernaut breaking out Magneto in the original version of Days of Future Past. Because they are not above reusing ideas they've had in their head forever. But it was such a tremendous relief watching this and seeing this movie's opinion of Wolverine's origin being, it doesn't matter. Because it does tell you everything you really need to know about Wolverine. He was a shitty Black Ops dude who killed people for Stryker. He volunteered to have his memory erased and be made into the ultimate weapon, but something went wrong, and now he's better off as being Wolverine, being part of the X-Men. That's really all you need to say.
Yeah, I love the scene we'll get later where he confronts Stryker for the last time, and Stryker says, "Hey, if you leave me here, you'll never learn your past." And he's carrying, an injured mutant, and he goes, whatever, and walks off. It's more important. He has essentially his own proper new self, his future, in his hands if he moves forward. And if he goes back, he's just facing a past that he doesn't want to see.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense. It's like, hey, perfect. We don't need to know all the details. That's the whole point. He is choosing to say they don't matter. I really like that as a strong character choice and development piece.
Sneaky Stryker.
So hear that in 30 years of comic books? Impossible!
So we have avoided talking about this the whole commentary. I am in love with that weird, spooky smoke effect they use for Cerebro in the first movie. I think that's really underrated, but holy shit, does Cerebro look cool in this movie?
Yeah.
That is such a cool idea, and it communicates what they're going for. Like this very, kind of hard to wrap your head around idea of Charles being linked to every human mind on Earth. Like it expresses that so succinctly that they don't need more than a line or two of exposition. Like you understand exactly what's going on.
No, we didn't mention it, but when Xavier was targeting the mutants, there was supposed to be a bunch of cameos of characters' powers going crazy, and a lot of name cameos too. There was supposed to be, we were going to see the actor playing Kank on the TV earlier start to get affected, and that's when he transformed into Blue Beast. When his powers were going crazy, there would have been Marrow walking down the streets of New York City, and their bones would have started growing out of control out of her body and whatnot. We would have seen Gambit from behind. He would have been playing with cards, and his powers would have started going crazy. There been all kinds of stuff. Even Storm's powers would have started going crazy, and it just kind of got pared down to just Mystique, and they couldn't afford all the other cameos.
It would have been kind of nice if we saw the impact of Cerebro's attack on society outside of this scene. If we saw people in actual cities freaking out and panicking. Not necessarily needed, but I think it would have helped drive the danger of what's happening right now.
No, the entire president world is the only one who matters.
I think we also missed this. So when Magneto flies out earlier, apparently that was something they weren't going to do because they thought it cost too much money. But Ian McKellen on the day demanded to fly.
I want to fly. I love how McKellen's like, Magneto flies and I want to fly.
You're not going to tell Ian McKellen no, make him fly. Also, we had this great moment too of Nightcrawler and Storm going back to their conversation of faith where, he's reminded, hey, you have to have your faith to get into this room. Yes, you might teleport into a wall or off a cliff or something, but if you don't, we're never going to be able to save the world, so you have to believe in yourself. Actual follow-through for a philosophical conversation from earlier. That's good screenwriting.
Hey! Look at that fucking early 2000s alternative rock music video pyro there.
Yeah.
You ever feel like breaking down? You ever feel out of place?
You ever feel really bad for Nightcrawler during this scene?
It's very
I feel
cold.
bad for Nightcrawler this entire movie. No one respects him or wants to hear about his time in the circus.
God damn it, Nightcrawler's just the best.
The Incredible Nightcrawler.
All right, so everyone knows my favorite mutant. What's your picks for best mutants?
Are we talking specifically in this film?
In comics or movie, whatever you go with, whatever you like more.
Beast was always my favorite.
Got a Beast lady over here.
I know.
Mike's gonna list 40 goddamn characters.
It's difficult for me. It's really fucking difficult for me.
I'm waiting for you to pick the worst one somehow. Like, oh man, it's all about Jubilee for me.
Fucking Spiral. Spiral is not technically a mutant. She's anyway.
Ooh.
Probably honestly, Kitty Pryde.
Shadowcat, nice.
Yeah,
I respect it.
we'll always love Shadowcat.
She's the only one who's brave enough to tell the truth about Charles Xavier.
Girl.
Yeah. Besides Nightcrawler, I really enjoyed Colossus in like the animated series.
I loved Colossus as a
him.
kid.
Every version of Colossus is wonderful.
How do you feel about Colossus in the Deadpool films, though? Because a lot of people are not enthused about the fact. I love that they just leave Jason behind to fucking die here.
Fuck that old
No,
man.
he's demon.
But a lot
No,
of people...
he's demon. Jesus,
people just
Nightcrawler. I do love how there was apparently shot of a giant thing like crushing him. They're like, it's just too sad. Let's take it out.
Yeah, that's a little much. We made a very sad, pathetic character with a super dark backstory. I don't think we need to show him getting crushed by debris. You can imagine that.
I have
Anyways,
mixed
back
feeling.
to Colossus. In Deadpool, so many people were bummed out because he was made more of a larger-than-life comedy character instead of the Colossus we know and love. But god damn it, do I really love his fight scene with Juggernaut in Deadpool
Oh,
too.
it's fucking spectacular. I like Colossus in the Deadpool movies. To me, I just try to frame it as, oh, it's like if a character appears in like a Deadpool comic or a different comic, they're always going to be slightly different. It's just, it's Colossus super heightened.
He is one of my favorite parts of those films.
Oh yeah, it's like, would I want this Colossus like straight on how he is in the Deadpool movies to be exactly the same in an X-Men movie? No, but for a Deadpool movie, he's great.
They at least understood that the Colossus is the best of us. That's his personality.
Damn right. I still ship him and Kitty. Or if she did leave him.
Damn you, comics!
Going
Or
back to
I have a feeling Phantom X is circling around him. That's why I always like to imagine.
I think we're about to go up to an amazing shot I never noticed until rewatching this the other day, where Patrick Stewart looks on in disgust at being touched by Halle Berry and then opens his mouth, and embraces Alan Cumming. It's like a joke take that they kept in by mistake. I want you to look for it.
I have never paid attention to this, so now I can't even think about anything else.
I had to rewind it like 5 times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. It's hilarious. So, hey, Rogue did a thing.
Rogue, as a kid, was like, Rogue's flying the X-Jet. She's doing the Rogue thing. Also, I just want to say, Blackbird. I really don't like how the movies turned it into the X-Jet, and it's just... Wow, he was like, that was a real, like, good soldier look he gave her, and then went about his business with his savior, Daddy Elf.
Just full on hugs, Nightcrawler. Just, nope, bring it in.
That was Jubilee, get these guests out of here. That was the soul of Xavier.
Take me away, circus boy, to the plane. Man, next time I go back to my parents' place, I'm gonna have to dig my Nightcrawler action figure out of the old.
You still have it?
I had the X2 Nightcrawler action figure out on a desk for years. I don't know where it is now.
I always wanted that.
I still have my X-Men 1 Magneto.
Ooh.
He's
I think I have
gigantic.
Toad as well somewhere still. I don't know if that got sold or not.
I love how Magneto revenged Stryker for this scene. He did the Magneto is angry at you thing.
Also, Leech is here the entire time. I love how prominent Leech is here, and then he's just a different character in X-Men 3.
It's part of that strong X-Men continuity. Everyone just morphs between movies or disappears or becomes a totally different person. Yeah.
I have to say, I actually like the X-Men movies' general resistance to fan service. I think that's ultimately for the best, but come on. You had the perfect opportunity for Brian Cox to say, "You dare call that thing human?"
That is bullshit. I've never thought about that, and I'm mad now.
Like, Stryker has one job.
He is one thing. He says one hateful line and then dies.
He points at Adam Warrock with disgust.
Thanks, Exposition Gene.
I'm obsessed with Logan calling him Pyro.
I know. Well, once again, it's like that's when they just said, fuck it, everyone's calling each other by their code names.
Which implies that Logan overheard that conversation and is still choosing to respect his decision.
That is how good of a guy Logan is. And he just likes the sound of the name. Like, that's cool. I'm Wolverine, you're Pyro. That's pretty cool.
Makes sense. He never learned the kid's actual name. That's why he calls him Pyro. It's like when a person uses nicknames for everybody, you know they're doing that because they don't remember real names.
Oh, so this is a cool ass effect. This is a very large miniature that they put a lot of fucking work in to making sure something you don't think about, the water has to appear as scale.
Yeah.
So they have to shoot out
with miniatures because water just doesn't scale very well.
Yeah, they have to shoot out with a very specific intensity. They have to foam it up in a very specific way to make it look scale. And seeing the behind the scenes stuff of them doing this, where they would then shoot into a tank where they could then refill it and shoot it back out if they needed to, and even rebuild it overnight and redo the entire thing, was really cool. It's an effect you don't think of, but yeah, they built a fairly large scale dam and then had it automated so they could just blast water through it.
I miss the age of bigatures. That needs to make a comeback.
Go, Cyclops, go. Boss
nowadays, we don't even need to film on a set. Actors don't even need to be wearing costumes.
We can just have Robert Downey Jr. Skype his performance in, and we'll fix it in post. No, just die already.
We're tired of you, Stryker.
No! Look at that fucking trailer shot.
Oh, yeah.
It's still kind of stunning to me that Jean's death was not a concrete fixed point in this movie until pretty late in the process.
Yeah, didn't they film the White House scene 2 ways?
Yeah.
No, like they did publicity stills to throw people off.
Oh, okay.
And they did a joke thing, but
partway, filming had actually started, hadn't it? Before they decided that, we're definitely going to kill Jean.
Singer said he decided when they were filming the museum scene.
Yeah.
They decided concrete. Because they still had a backup plan that after they all thought she was dead, you would hear Nightcrawler bamf, and he'd be holding her soaking wet body, and they would resuscitate her.
That'd been kind of a weird ending.
Yeah, I think Jansen said she didn't know until halfway through production.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they said they made up their minds, and then they waited another month before they told her what they were going to do.
And it's even funnier when you consider really early versions of this. Penn revealed this when he was promoting Ready Player One, that the original conversations for X2 were about just doing a flat-out Phoenix story. And Penn had talked Singer into building to it instead. Which is also tragic now when you look back on it. Oh, you won't have all the time in the world to build to that.
I love that with Ready Player One, Zach Penn saw a script to completion.
Finally.
It's about goddamn time.
Only in the industry since the early 90s.
Also, Scott and Logan holding each other is the most beautiful thing in the world.
Oh, yeah. Fuck action movie masculinity. The X-Men movies do not play in that. Even with Wolverine. What's so fucking great about them?
That was what was so, ended up being so perfect about the casting of Jackman, because virtually any other actor, if they went with a tough guy actor, we would not have gotten stuff like that. Like the fact that
yeah.
they went to a musical theater dude and had him play tough, like that is the smartest, or not really smart, it's the best bit of accidental luck in this entire franchise.
Well, just think. Okay, so we're getting the X-Men movies right now, where you get Hugh Jackman, who is a super duper tough guy, but also can have those sensitive moments. And right around the same period, 2003, is when we got the Return of the King. And I would say Aragorn is very much in the same mold as that, way more sensitive probably than Wolverine.
Oh, yeah.
But what a banner time for like super masculine dudes that are not overly so. Like they definitely have moments of tenderness, and they're not afraid to show that.
Oh, last minute recast tough guys at that.
Very true. Ian McKellen is just the glue that holds those productions together.
Hey, going back to the dam breaking, based on a lot of imagery, I think that makes its way in here, especially with this movie with Nightcrawler and whatnot. Do you think they were at all consciously playing on flood imagery, especially with Stryker?
I could
like biblical floods?
Yeah.
We do have parting the sea very noticeably there. It wouldn't surprise me.
I don't know. It feels like Magneto needs to be using the floods to wipe people out for that to work. Then
Maybe,
again,
but...
Singer does love that kind of biblical-inspired imagery. I mean, just think of Superman Returns.
Yeah, Singer puts a lot of biblical imagery into stuff. I mean, Superman just does a goddamn Jesus pose at one point, so...
Yeah.
So look at Nightcrawler chilling in the background.
I absolutely hate the idea of Nightcrawler hiding in the background going,
Mein Dick.
Just doing like the evil caretaker voice from goddamn Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers. I don't like it.
I was like, could you imagine if they, instead of this, they just did the ending of God Loves Man Kills, where they're just chilling at the mansion going, yeah, Magneto's probably right. Let's kill everybody.
Well, again, it's a strong statement. We've seen what Professor X can do. If he wanted to, he could smooth this whole situation out by using his mind control powers to just have the president say whatever he wanted. And instead, they do this soft confrontation where he shows them that they're not a threat. He shows the guy who attacked the president earlier just chilling in the background like, hey, sorry about that. And he leaves this to the president to decide how he wants to handle this moving forward. He doesn't insist, and he doesn't use his powers to force. Which, I mean, that's Xavier in these movies in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting theme of free will to incite change. Because everything with Stryker is either mind control or forcement or versions of illusions to kind of remove the concept of free will from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
The force change, and Xavier could just easily force change, but chooses not to. It also feels very much like this is the end of like an X-Men or like a prolonged X-Men origin.
Yeah. I do really enjoy that the first X-Men movie ended on one of the most American pieces of iconography out there, the Statue of Liberty. And this one bumps that into another level by saying, okay, the final confrontation, if you'll phrase it that way, is going to be in the goddamn Oval Office. Like, as political statements, I don't know how you can get more direct than that. Like, our final battles are going to take place in notable hallmarks of freedom.
And specifically, the outsiders are an integral part of America.
Yeah. Once again, a movie that needs to come out and be rewatched now. It's also a really cool kind of flipped on its head version of the finale from God Loves Man Kills. You know, it's a news briefing. It's a press conference.
Part of me wishes that was the last shot of the movie, though. Just the president looking down as he's deciding how to change his speech.
Oh, they go Watchmen with it?
Like,
Also,
I enjoy the idea of just him kind of hesitating, then you have the leeway of what you want to do with X3. Instead, you come back to the mansion and you have this little bit of a send-off here with Professor X getting the last words. We have Wolverine and Cyclops coming to emotional terms over Jean Grey's death.
70s as fuck Logan here.
Oh, yeah,
that
shirt.
chest hair.
Just being a John Byrne drawing all of a sudden.
Back with his Barry Windsor Smith hair.
And Cyclops' morning sweater.
I think this is a good emotional coda, but in my mind, I probably would have chopped things right to that final confrontation in the Oval Office, and maybe leave this as deleted scenes or a start to the next movie or something.
I could maybe see you getting away with throwing this in after the death and establishing that there was a gap between Gene's death and that scene, but I'm pretty happy with the note this ends on.
Yeah, it's all
It's very much
cathartic.
an X-Men log.
It's a full meal, is what it is. A full hearty meal.
I think it is like a book. This would be perfectly fine and acceptable, but as a movie, it doesn't flow as well for me. It just makes the ending seem like it's been going too long.
I mean, what's really missing from this scene is I know they shot this, but I understand why it didn't end up in the movie. Is after that conversation between Logan and Scott, he steals his bike again, and you just see a shot of him smiling as he peels out of the Xavier Institute. Credits.
God damn it, Cyclops! Lock your bikes up.
They
Jamie,
just same shot from the first movie.
Jamie, I like your joke. I thought you were going to go with, and then Professor Xavier explains how to make a drink for 15 minutes straight.
But it is a great drink.
All filled with brewed embryos. So I do love how Xavier is essentially saying, it's going to be all right. Jean is going to rip me to shreds in the middle of a childhood. I finally get to die. And I get a slightly younger body.
Oh, X3. I'm kind of excited to watch X3. I have not seen it in years.
It's been a long time for me.
Yeah. Maybe I'll like it more this time.
It's an interesting beast.
I see what you did there, Beast.
No.
Oh.
Hey, look, X-Men did get a story credit though.
Yeah, good for him.
That no one actually takes seriously for some reason.
I'm trying to think. X3 has the post-credit scene. I don't remember how many other X-Men movies do. I think most of them do. Was this like the last X-Men to not have a post-credit scene?
I believe so, actually.
Yeah,
Weird.
X3 does. What's First Class after credit scene?
I don't know if
First Class has one.
has one or not.
First Class does not.
Yeah, First Class doesn't. I don't remember Days of Future
Wolverine
Past having one.
Origins has one.
Or Origins,
Actually, I think there were a couple.
5.
Yeah. Logan, actually, does Logan have one? I don't think it
No.
does. No. Well, that one makes sense because it's the ending. But the Wolverine definitely has one. X3 has one.
Wait. Days of Future
Apocalypse.
Past was Apocalypse, yes.
Oh yeah, Days of Future Past has Apocalypse. Apocalypse has the Mr. Sinister one.
Yep. I don't think Phoenix has
I don't
one.
think so either.
But that makes sense because they knew they were pretty much done at that point.
I'm sure the original version of Phoenix had one, but we'll get into that eventually. Wait till we get to
Weird.
Phoenix. It's
It's
just me
strange to
screaming into a microphone for about 2 hours straight. I've looked up so much research, you have no idea. I could take you through the entire version of a movie that was filmed somewhere. Anyway.
I'm still amazed that Blu-ray has a commentary from Kinberg. That's going to
Yep.
be interesting.
That's going to be a painful commentary to listen. I assume he's just sobbing the entire time.
Oh, it's like the Repo commentary.
Whew.
I've listened to this commentary, and he's mostly in good spirits the whole time. I think they must have recorded it like before the movie came out.
He's been very diplomatic.
Yeah.
He
Anyways,
wants to have
that's for the future.
We'll get there. We'll get to my
We'll get
anger and disgust and just lobbying against capitalism. So I'm
We'll
convinced
always
that
have
kid was.
X1 and X2.
I'm convinced the kid who played Ronnie was cast because his name was James Kirk.
This fact has probably been shared multiple times, and I've just forgotten it multiple times. But Singer on one of the commentary tracks mentions he was like an assistant on Street Trash.
Oh, that blew your mind too?
Yeah, I could have sworn like that's the kind of detail I assumed Joe Bob Briggs would have mentioned at some point. How did I just find out about this now?
Of all things, fucking street trash.
How do you go from street trash to like, hey, here's $100 million, go make an X2? I mean, what a world! You never know where you're gonna end up.
The director of X-Men was probably on set the day of that weird penis gag scene.
For all we know, that might have been his idea.
That's a dark joke now.
Yeah, I suppose.
Street Trash is not good, by the way, but I do kind of love it.
Okay.
Street Trash may be the worst film I've ever seen.
It's pretty fucking bad. I really want to live in that tire dome, though.
Oh yeah, those homeless children have it made, and their home made of tires that has a couch.
That movie wants to be the stuff so bad. Oof.
I don't even know if that's true. The stuff had like a very driving plot behind it. Street Trash is...
Street Trash is, it's the 80s, so we hate homeless people.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's evil. Like, it's not just a very bad movie.
It's not the Mangler, Jamie. It's not alive.
It's just an evil fucking print.
I'm glad we ended this X-Men 2, X-Men United commentary on a Street Trash conversation.
Mike, there's 4 more minutes of credits to roll here.
We don't have to talk through the credits, but I do want to say, X-Men 2 not only holds up, but I think is actually better than it was. I think it exceeds itself now.
Yeah.
I really dig it. I think most of my favorite X-Men franchise moments happen in this film. Magneto's escape, the opening attack with Nightcrawler, just so many little moments like that. Just it all is here. It's in this movie. I can't think of too many iconic things from X3 I really love. Maybe Juggernaut's appearance, but that's more
like the end
for
fight
humor's sake.
a little bit.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
The best Mystique moments in this movie, I don't know. Most of my favorite stuff is really in this film.
Yeah. It's a kind of a perfect X-Men movie. I mean, it's such a good comic book movie. We've talked about this, that the early MCU movies and a lot of comic book movies after this kind of aped the X2 structure the same way so many movies aped the Empire Strikes Back structure.
Well, even this one, I would say, it's kind of doing the Empire Strikes Back. There's a lot of dark moments here.
It's fascinating watching, like, the Fantastic Four movies and seeing Fox just do the same thing with those. Like, especially Rise of the Silver Surfer is very X-Men too.
Very much so.
Huh. Boy. I go a long time without ever thinking of those kind of failed early Marvel movies. Every once in a while, I just think I should binge those. I should just sit down and watch like Ghost Rider and Fantastic Four 1 and 2, and just feel miserable. Like I should. It's like just when you decide to eat a full gallon of chocolate ice cream.
Well, it's funny whenever you hear people dunking on failed franchises now and stuff like the Dark Universe. It's like in the 2000s, like that was the graveyard of the Lost franchise. I mean, even looking at X-Men, that like the universe they were building was scuttled so many times throughout that series. And has only stopped being scuttled this year with its complete discontinuation.
We can't throw it out anymore. It's already dead. Maybe. Let's see how this last one does that we're finally releasing.
I mean, corporate bullshit had to happen for it to finally be scuttled permanently.
All right, imagine this. The New Mutants comes out and fucking makes bank, like $500 million. And now Disney has to decide what the hell they're going to do.
Disney's very petty. I don't think they'd care.
That's true. They have enough money where they can shrug it off. But I like the idea of them making more.
Pretty much. And we get all the money because we fired everyone who would be paid normally. They're on a yacht that's floating, just slightly above the ground. They have that technology.
Oh yeah, that's probably part of the new park. Well, folks, we have made it to the end of X2, X-Men United. I don't have anything more, deep to say than that. We have finished watching the movie. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to hear more of our commentaries or our normal episodes that aren't commentaries, you can find us under Box Office Pulp on Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher. Just look for Box Office Pulp.
And Mike, where can they find you on the interwebs?
You can find my horror movie reviews and retrospectives in written form on horrormovieshub.com. And be sure to also look out for Rachel Rocks Horror on YouTube by subscribing to Final Girl Productions.
And Jamie.
You can find me on my YouTube show, Comic Macabre. There'll be a link in the description. And you can find me on Twitter at MondoFunky and at Comic Macabre.
Please don't find me. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for listening to our No, I'm desperate for Twitter followers.
We can pimp
find me.
We can pimp our fucking personal Twitter accounts. I thought it would just anger Cody. I'm at Lucky Duck Napier.
No, you don't get followers. If you do, okay, folks at home, you can follow Mike. That's fine. You can follow Jamie. That's fine. But if you follow either of them, you also have to follow me. Them's the rules.
It's true.
Love me, love MacGyver.
It's a team effort here. You got to follow all of our shitty tweets. Anyways, this has been X2. This has been Box Office Pulp. Hell out of here. Those credits went so long, I don't have anything to say for the after credit scene.
Jamie, yell Wolverine.
Wolverine!
You get more out of life when you go out to a movie. Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
Oh, damn, that came through really nice.
Yeah, that did. That was great. That was really professional sounding. I really liked that.
That sounded like you're trying to make your own ringtone. That was great.
Yeah, the after credit scene is going to be us praising your performance saying Wolverine. That was actually really awesime. Good job.
Legitimately fantastic. That was the best thing we did the entire episode. Nice.
The gals got pipes.
I just want to say the one I was going to go for before you said that was, you should have ended the commentary when you had the chance.
Oh, I like that one too.
The Wolverine was better. That was good, but the Wolverine was just on such another level.
Okay, we'll include that one in the after credit scene too. Good ideas all around, everybody. Good job. Good job.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.